Okay, basic mit Malchus. Good the volume? It's good the volume. Okay.
For us, you don't need it.
I'll do that for the rest of the day.
Ah, okay.
Okay, so it's very interesting. The Rebbe made a siyum on Masechta Soita Tavshel Hey. It's a very geschmack beer. We all know the famous explanation about Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Nachman, regarding Botlo, Mishameis, Rebbe Botlo, Ano V'Yirascheit. Right, that when Rebbe passed away, so then humility and fear of sin was annulled. It wasn't around anymore. People were not, handling that anymore. And Rabbi Yosef and Nachman said, "Letisni anova likano, letisni yiraschet likano." Right. So we know the famous hadronim of the Rebbe on it. And here there's a very interesting, very geschmack and nekuda here. The Rebbe explains like this. He says that the whole list of things that are written in the Mishnah, of things that are happening, that were bottled at the time, and the things also that the Gemara added, were all things that are, things that are happening in the time of the Churban Beis Hamikdash, the time of Golus, and the Tanoim and Amoraim are trying to tell us with these inyanim that even though the matzah is shver, nevertheless, look at us. We're still doing Torah mitzvahs, and we're going to bring Mashiach. Meaning, you shouldn't think that because the matzah is so shvach, the matzah is so low, therefore, you should give up, and there shouldn't be any more, that's it. Mashiach is not coming anymore, there's no need of doing Torah mitzvahs. Rather, they're saying the whole adrabah. Mashiach is going to come, we have to continue. Even if the matzah is difficult, we have to continue and do what we need to do our avodas Hashem. Now, what does that mean? That means that even though these things are talking very difficult things that are happening close to the times of, times of Golus, Churban Beis Hamikdash, before Mashiach comes, but they're still not things that are going to mevatel chas v'sholom the whole bias HaMoshiach. Now, so what was this inyan of Anov and Yiraschet that Rabbi Yisrael and Nachman jumped up to say, no, they were not both. That is because if there's no Anov and Yiraschet, the Rebbe says, in a way, chas v'sholom Mashiach can come. Meaning, like the same way by Yitzias Mitzrayim, there was this Nekuda Kibora Chaom, right? That the Yidden had to run away, and if they would stay mamash another moment, they that's it. They wouldn't be able to be nigal, and they will be farzunk in the memta sharetume. So the Rebbe says so too here. Here also by Moshiach, for Moshiach, if there wouldn't be the sin of Anov and Yiraschet, if it's stuck a bottle, Chas v'sholom Moshiach can come. That's why Rabbi Yosef and Nachman said that there's no way. There is still Anov and Yiraschet. Even in the lower level, but there's still Anov and Yiraschet. Why Anov and Yiraschet? Because the whole reason why the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed was because Sinas Chinam. So Anov and Yiraschet are the opposite of Sinas Chinam, because Gaiva is Sinas Chinam, Takeh Chinam, because this that you feel big about yourself and think that others think low about you, etc. All this is Mamash Chinam. And so to Yiraschet, because when you have no Yireh, then you do whatever you want to have Keiros. So these two Nekudas, and therefore they're Sinas Chinam, because you don't care about the other person. Therefore these two Nekudas, these two Inyonim of Anov and Yiraschet are crucial inyanim that we have to keep up until Mashiach comes. Because that's going to be mevatel the siba of the churban of Sinas Chinam. Now, what's interesting is, where do we see that this union of Yiras Chet and Anove are, okay, they're not on the highest level, they're still on the lower level. That's what they said. Letisne Anove dikano, letisne Yiras Chet dikano. So the Rebbe brings two stories of Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Nachman. That Rabbi Yosef, for example, which is the one who said Letisne Anove dikano. So let me start with Rabbi Nachman first. I have to remember Rabbi Yosef. But Rabbi Nachman's word is that he one time took off his glima, right? It says in the Gemara story that he took off his garment from his handkerchief from his head, from his eyes, and then he saw a vine, and he took from the vine, and he bit into the grapes from the vine. So that showed, it wasn't his vine, it was Gzela. That shows that there was a lacking Yiras Chet. But Rabbi Yosef, there was also an interesting Maaseh. What was the Maaseh about Rabbi Yosef? Never brings it here. Dominguez, you remember the Maaseh of Rabbi Yosef? Why there's no Anova but Rabbi Yosef?
There's no Anova, we don't know.
Yeah, but what was there was here? But there was stuck a lower level of Anova. I don't remember now. Anyways. So the kid said, we see that even though there was stuck a lower level of Anova and Yiras Chet, but nevertheless, these are inyonim that have to be kept up until Mashiach comes. It's very, very geschmacky way that I've brought out this whole theme on
They didn't stay with that level.
Huh?
They didn't stay with that level.
What do you mean they didn't stay with that level?
They themselves worked up.
Oh, okay, I'm sure, but I'm saying the Rebbe's Nekuda was that they wanted to show that even though they, at a certain level, have a lower level of Anove or Yiras Chet than the previous...
They weren't perfect.
They weren't, exactly. Still, they had Anove and Yiras Chet, and therefore for us, we have to, Anove and Yiras Chet, even in our Dargeh, is something which we have to work on and keep up, because that's going to bring... That's what's going to take away the sibo of Golus, and Mimele build the Beis Hamikdash. So to start the Kийнus Torah, we have the honor to have Rabbi Yosef Minkowitz, the Dean, the Menahel of Beis Rivke, Shliach of the Rebbe, Mונטריאול, from the senior Shluchim to start the Kийнus Torah.
Good morning, everybody. The topic is the dateline in Halacha, which is something that the Rebbe is very much involved in. It has psukim, which the Rebbe himself says may be strange, that we'll see further on. But first you have to explain what is the dateline, because the dateline, spoken to many people, they read about it, they read about the Sichos, they don't really fully visualize and see what it is. So the best way to visualize is I brought a globe. With a globe, you can actually understand and see what we're talking about in Peil Mamish. As the Kuzari, who was written almost 1,000 years ago, writes that it's inevitable we must have a dateline. There must be a beginning where the day starts. And to show it b'muchesh, you can pick any place in the world. We'll start, let's say, with picking right over here in Mונטריאול. This is over here, this area here, what I show you here. We're not going to move the globe, and we'll see what's happening. So let's say over here, it's Monday, 6 p.m. The day starts by Erevei Baker, so we start with the night, by Erevei Baker, So we start with 6 p.m. So Monday, 6 p.m. Now, we all know that, for example, in California, when it's 6 p.m. Monday, what time is it in California?
3 p.m.
3?
Yeah.
Oh, PM is not, yeah.
3 in the afternoon. 3 hours beyond.
3 in the afternoon. 3 p.m., which means that the day didn't finish by then. We all know that the sun rises and the sun sets every single second in different locations as the sun moves on or returns, whatever. We're not going to get into that now. And the sunrise and sunset every single second. So when it's 6 p.m. over here, it's 3 p.m. Sunday. And basically, to make it easier, the Rambam measures it that way, that the entire globe is divided in 360 degrees. And it's used today also. It's used today in science, in astronomy. Degrees are very important, and it's very simple to cheshbon, because every 15 degrees on the longitude or longitude, different ways how to pronounce it, is 1 hour. 15 degrees times 24 is 360. So you divide 360 by 24 of 24 hours, you get 15 degrees throughout the entire world. Now on the equator, which is the widest part of the degrees, so there each one is about 1,000 miles. As you keep on going, it moves up and then it gets narrower, but it's still the same. So let's say Mונטריאול is much narrower because of where we are. We're approximately on the degree of 75, and if you go another 45 degrees, then that would be Los Angeles, California. So there, it would come out to be 3 hours earlier. That's 15 degrees. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. If you go
East.
you have it's 45 degrees. If you go 90 is a quarter around. It's 6 hours. It's 6 hours. What does that mean? It's 6 hours would be Sunday midnight. Sunday midnight. We start off at 6 p.m. and I'm sorry, Sunday midday. Sunday midday. We start off at 6 p.m. We're going. The sun didn't rise there yet. The day over there is 6 hours removed. If you keep on going another 6 hours, you're going to get to Sunday, 6 o'clock in the morning. And if you keep on going further, you're going to get to Sunday. We started off with Monday. We start off with Monday at 6 p.m. You keep on going over here, you'll end up with Sunday, 6 p.m., exactly the same location. 6 p.m. means the sun is setting. Now both people see the sun setting, and over here we started off at Monday, 6 p.m., and if you go around like this, it'll come out to be Sunday, 6 p.m. In other words, you can do, let's say, with sunrise. If you have sunrise, it might be easier to visualize. If you have, for example, Monday, 6 a.m., which means in Los Angeles, the sun didn't rise yet. And you keep on going that way, it's 3 hours earlier, 6 hours earlier, 12 hours earlier, till 24 hours earlier, they both see sunrise. Both see sunrise, but it'll come out that on the same exact location. It could be in Mונטריאול, could be any place. Same exact location, it'll be, the sun will be exactly in the same location, but over here, it's Monday morning, and here it's Sunday morning. As the Kuzri writes, it's inevitable. There must be a place that there has to be a demarcation line where it is. So till the last 150 years, it wasn't really a practical thing. It was hardly any traveling across areas that's the way it is now, that has the demarcation line. And what that's called is the international date line. The Goyim put that together. On 180 degrees, they put together a line that on one side of the line, for example, is Sunday, it could be 2 p.m., the sun is shining. The other side is also the same 2 p.m., the sun doesn't change, the sunlight doesn't change. But over there it's Monday, the same exact time. Same exact time. If you're going from Mizrach, if you're going from America to Australia, for example, it's If you go the other way, you're getting the day back again. If you came from Monday, all of a sudden it becomes Sunday. So this becomes a very, very big shaila in halacha. What do we do? First thing is, let's say Shabbos. So Shabbos is mekadshe b'kayim. Shabbos is according to where the kavat taydich is up halacha. That's what we'll see in a second. Because the goyish kavat taydich is a goyish kavat taydich. The question is halachically, where's the kavat taydich? Where's the date line? Where's this line according to the halacha that we should tell us that the day moves over there? So, but once we establish where the kavat taydich is, so then if it's Shabbos on this side of the kavat taydich in Australia, if you come there, you keep Shabbos the way they keep Shabbos there. If it comes a Yom Tiv, Pesach, Tezvav Nisan, Tezvav Tishrei for Sukkot, you keep the way it is there. You keep the way it is there. So when the Shaila can come up, and we'll soon see in a minute. So the Shaila is, where is this kavat taydich? So the kavat taydich, I brought you some papers here, so you'll be able to visualize it. And as the Rebbe says, there's many shittas actually. You want to give it out to the people there so they'll be able to make it easier to understand. There's many shittas actually. It's starting on the kavat taydich, they put together even 13. But mainly there's 3, as the Rebbe brings down, there's actually 3. Some of them are not, we're not going to discuss now. But the first one is the Chazon Ish wrote a whole kuntres, whole sefer, Chai Shoyes, saying where the kavat taydich is. And this is based on the Gemara Rosh Hashanah of Chofam with Beis, Neila, Kedem Chatzeis, which means that the Mela was before Chatzeis or after Chatzeis, depending, before Chatzeis it could be a proper Kiddush Levana. If it's after Chatzeis, why? Because you have to see it in other places in the world. And the Baal HaMoed, Zcharia, explains that Barichas Gdeila explains that 6 hours back, the 6 hours and it goes 18 hours. He says, Askolas HaYishuv, beginning of the Yishuv, where people are living, where people are settled, that's 6 hours back, that's the beginning. Now 6 hours back is 90 degrees from Yerushalayim. 90 degrees from Yerushalayim. So according to the Chazon Ish, he bases it on the Baal HaMoed, and also on the Kuzari, he bases it on that's where the kavat taydich is, and the date starts over there. So, which means if you're going from there, going further west, then you're in the same time zone, not time zone, but the same time of the same day as Yerushalayim. Once you pass that, you're on the other side, then you're like in America, like the Mighty, the other side. We'll get in a second ramifications of what happens with this shita. Then there's a shita of Rabbi Chiel Michal Tukuczynski. He wrote a Sefer Hayomim, and he discusses at length the Baal HaMoed and the Kuzari, and actually he had a discussion with the Chazon Ish himself. By him, he says Yerushalayim is the center. Both shittas start with Yerushalayim as the center, Tabar HaOretz. So Chazon Ish says it's 90 degrees, and the Chiel Michal Tukuczynski says it's 180 degrees east, going east of Yerushalayim. There's another shita, and he bases it that then comes out that Yerushalayim is the middle. So you have 180 on the right side, 180 on the left side, and that's it starts 180 starting from east of Yerushalayim. There's another shita that the Rebbe brings down, the famous person, David Shapiro, who wrote Sforim Neitzion. He knew the astronomy inside out. He's one of the biggest specialists in the previous generation. The Rebbe has a correspondence with him also. And he says, he bases it on what it says that when Hashem created the world, on Wednesday, the sun was on Wednesday. It says in Chumash. The shal is, what was the hour? What was the hour? Did it start off sunrise, 6 o'clock in the morning? Was it in the evening? So it says it was 9 o'clock. It's both number Rabbeinu Sadia Goyin. The Levush brings it in Simon Tov Chav Ches. He says, brings it from Shem Razal. the Meforish on the Hilchos Kiddush HaChedesh from the Rambam, Pedig Tes, Halacha Gimel, they all bring, and he brings down that it's a well-known thing, that it's 3 hours. And the 3 hours is 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock in the morning, because the Sidyenim Nivra, the strongest, and it shines bright, 9 o'clock. That's what they explain. So if it's 9 o'clock, so then, when did that day start? Or when does the next day start? So that's very simple. If it's 9 o'clock, 9 o'clock comes out as 90 degrees. 90 degrees, which is, you have 30 degrees you have on
75.
what?
75 degrees. It's 3 hours.
No.
It's 45 degrees.
No, you have to go, when will the day end, for example? How far?
Oh, okay, the opposite.
The other way.
35
In other words,
degrees.
if you're going to count, it's 225, and 135 degrees, it's 135 degrees, we need 135 degrees for 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock is 135 degrees, because there's the 9 o'clock going, you have to go back to the beginning of the day. The day starts 6 p.m. So you go back, it's the 3 hours is 45 degrees, and then you have 90 degrees for the rest of the time. It's 135 degrees. If you go the other way around, fully come around, it'll be 225 degrees going all around, and then you come to the place where it starts. So according to the David Shapiro, if they see it, it comes out 135 degrees east, actually west.
East of Yerushalayim.
West of Yerushalayim. So now we'll go on the page here. We'll be able to see what's going on over here. This is very interesting. So we'll start with the left side. The left side is the orange line. That's Yerushalayim. So according to all the Shittas, Yerushalayim is the center. We start the measurements from there. So the Chazon Ish and the Kuczynski, they base it on the center, and where does it start from? So it's either a quarter of the way around. That's according to the Chazon Ish, so it's 90 degrees, or it's 180. David Shapiro also starts with the center of Eretz Yisrael, and because when the Bria Sa'elam and the sun started shining, it was 9 o'clock, and now you have to go back to the beginning of that wasn't the beginning of the day. The beginning of the day is 6 p.m., so you have to go back to 6 p.m. So there, it comes out to 135 degrees. So now we have the Chazon Ish. The Chazon Ish has it 90 degrees. So if you look at the boxes on top, the box on top tells you the degrees. It's 90 degrees, comes out according to the measurements that is used today, Greenwich being in England, that's 0. And anything from there, either there's west of it and there's east of it. So here we're going east of Greenwich. Going to the right side, that's east of Greenwich. So it comes out 125 degrees east of Greenwich. Then you have the second box. The second box is the David Shapiro, the Meitzir. So that goes, it's called Mid-Pacific Paskin. So by him it comes out 170, 180, depending, there's other Paskin around that. And then you have Kuczynski is 180 degrees, comes out, you see on the line on the right side. Now the international dateline is officially by 180 degrees from Greenwich. So it's exactly halfway around. And they made it that way because it's in the Pacific, so it's less traveled and it doesn't go through basic countries, etc., masses of land. But the reality is that it does go through. There's islands over there, the Siberia. So that's what you see. The one that you see, the line that's crooked, it says civil international dateline. That's officially the dateline. So the reality is it's officially 180, but as you see, it moves around all the Seiten, because the idea is to not to have it going through the middle of a city, middle of a street, and one guy is Sunday, one guy is Monday, so they want to avoid that. So they made it Drezach all around. So that's, you have basically in a nutshell. Now, there's the Chazon Ish Shita, if you look carefully, the green area means it's the same like on the left side is like the same, like Yerushalayim, basically the same. But the Chazon Ish's dateline, the Kavataylich, goes through major countries. It goes through Siberia and Russia, and also goes through Australia. You see on the bottom, only the left side, like Perth, the cities that are on the left side of Australia would be on the Kavataylich, together with Israel. On the right side, it goes like America, which means if you're on the right side of that Kavataylich, so people over there, by them it's called Shabbos, by you it's Friday, just like in America, so Friday. When they have Sunday, that's your Shabbos, according to that Kavataylich. But the Chazon Ish was Machadish, he calls it greater. Greater means that it schleps along. If you have any piece of land that's on this side, on the left side of the Kavataylich, it pulls along with it all the rest of the land. Could be a huge area, maybe even the majority. Like for example, in Australia, it's only a small portion. A small portion is on this side of the Kavataylich, and the majority is on the other side of the Kavataylich. Nevertheless, it's all pulled back. So basically, the Kavataylich turns. And that's why you see it in blue. In blue means that according to the Chazon Ish, it incorporates the rest of Australia, incorporates the rest of Russia and Siberia, that's on top. It incorporates that, and so it becomes that's a very big chiddush, obviously, many poskim today, the question, etc., but that's just giving you the sheet of the Chazon Ish. But now, according to the Chazon Ish's major problems, even according to Shita himself, what's the problem? Look on the map. Look on the map. Look on the right side of the Chazon Ish. The greater only helps if a portion of it is on the left side with Israel, can schlep along the others. But let's say it's an island. It's an island, for example, Japan. On the bottom you have Tasmania, you have New Zealand. It's an island. So there's nothing to schlep it along. So according to the Chazon Ish, exactly that's exactly the halacha l'maisa. That anybody who's on those islands, could be a big island like Australia, like Japan or Tasmania or New Zealand, they have to keep it like America, keep it a different day. Now this is not just a theoretical shaila, it was a practical, very, very, very life and death question. During World War II, as we know, that the council in Kovne, in Lithuania, gave out thousands of visas to go to Japan. And many yeshiva bochrim in the light, middle yeshiva, many hundreds. The Chabad have also said to go there. Many received these. They had to travel a long time, the Trans-Siberian railway till they get finally they got to Japan. When they got to Japan, they already heard about before, there's a big problem with when do we keep Shabbos? When do we have to keep Shabbos? Should we keep Shabbos when they keep Shabbos over there? Because they're following the international dateline. The national dateline is that they're on this side. So when the Shabbos is Shabbos, you keep Shabbos. According to the Chazon Ish, when Shabbos is Shabbos, that's Friday. That's Friday. Because you have to cross the dateline. But you're on the other side of the dateline. As you can see, Chazon Ish dateline on the left side puts them on the other side of the dateline. So when it's Sunday there, then it's Shabbos. So there was a big dilemma. They knew other poskim hold differently. So there was a shaila back and forth, and they tried to keep 2-day Shabbos, and whether the Shishivas they said in Molder Shabbos, Mashiach would come. There's a Shabbos here, Shabbos there. That is a different Shabbos. And so one day they kept Shabbos, and one day they refrained from doing malachas, their Isa, malachas, their Rabbanon. And questions about film. It was a very big, complicated situation. But then Yom Kippur is coming, and Yom Kippur is a big problem. Yom Kippur, the fast 2 days, the Chumrah 2 days, is a grace of problem, especially life and death. So they wrote a telegram. In those days, one of the urgent things was like telegram. And they wrote, Hatzilu, please save us. They wrote to the Rabbanim in Israel, they wrote to the Ger Rebbe, to the Rabbi Roshi, and they convened a whole asifa of many Rabbanim, like once mentioned before, Kupczynski and Rabbi Shapiro, Shlomo Zalman Auerbach was there also, and Rabbi Zevin, to be done on this thing, we have to come to a conclusion. So they came to the conclusion that the Kavat Tayrich is, as we said before, either according to Dr. Kuczynski or even according to W. Shapiro. So then those islands are on the left side. As you can see, the red are those islands, which include Japan, where they were. So they said, no question. Yom Kippur at that year was on a Wednesday. So they said, fast on Wednesday, Yom Kippur, the way it's over there. But the Chazon Ish, he wrote a telegram. He wrote, it's a very famous, they say it's one of the most famous psukim, it's a one-liner. He wrote, Ichlo b'Revi'i, v'tzeimu b'Chamishi. Eat on Wednesday, and fast on Thursday. Fast on Thursday. So Yom Kippur, instead of being on Wednesday, he said it should be on Thursday. Don't worry about anything. That's what it is, and finished. And this created a very big upheaval. As a matter of fact, the Rabbanim also sent a telegram later. They were a little bit hesitant. They said, what's going to happen now? People are going to fast 2 days. This was Absat so Herzog, the Rabaroshi, and others. They sent a telegram that you should keep it according to the way it is, according to the local Wednesday, Yom Kippur, that's the day. So what ended up happening, there was a very big mishmash over there. There was hundreds of the Miller Yeshiva Bachtim and others, the Chatmul were there, and didn't know what to do. So some followed, many followed. This was the Rav Posky, but many followed what the Chazon Ish said, and some even fasted 2 days. How they made it, I don't know. But they made it somehow. They fasted 2 days. That's maybe a minority, but that was at that time. At that time. So, but the psak remains today. According to the Chazon Ish, someone who travels to Japan or to New Zealand or to Tasmania has to keep Shabbos when it's Sunday there. So that's psak. Again, so the mentioned before, most poskim hold differently, but even today, there's some people here don't travel to Japan, or go to Chumre, etc., etc. Now we'll go with the other shita. The other shita is, as we go down the line, let's move to the right. Move to the right, and that's Rav Kuczynski, 180. But that also creates a problem. It puts Hawaii on the other side, which means if you're going from California to Hawaii, you cross the date line. So by then Shabbos, according to Allah, according to Rav Kuczynski, it's really Sunday. Not only that, even in Alaska, it also goes to like Anchorage, the big cities, it puts Anchorage on the other side of the date line. So unless you use the greater shita, which the poskim today said it's a problem even over there on using it in Australia, but Alaska said we shouldn't use it. It becomes another problem. So the one that's closest to the actual international date line that doesn't cause any upheaval is the one that we mentioned, that David Shapiro, the Nazi, which according to him, as you can see, it comes out to about 170 degrees east of Greenwich. Okay, and the date line is 180, and also it flips around, as we said before. So basically, that it puts Hawaii and Alaska where it is kept the whole time, according to the days they keep over there, and it keeps Australia, the whole Australia, and Japan, everything to say the Masuda. So there's other shittas also. Some say that you just follow the Chazokeh of the date line, the Goyish date line, the Kasher, the Zalman Meltzer, and the others. But halachically becomes a big issue because the Chazokeh, first of all, the Chazokeh changed around. The date line, certain countries were taken over and they moved the date line around because they say, well, now we belong to this country, belong to that country. It's not that you can play around with. Halach is a halach. Okay, so this at least gives a little bit of a visual scene of what happens with the date line and halachically. It's a gay very much today also. By the way, I want to mention today people travel back and forth to what we call the Far East. So it used to be basically the only way to go was to go, the shortest way was to go to the Pacific. Pacific is the shortest way. You go the other way, then you don't cross the date line. Just the days are a little bit shorter every day. So you go to Israel. And you keep on going, and you get to China, you get to Japan, without crossing the date line. You're coming in from the other side. You're going around, you're coming up the other side. So today, after Russia gave permission for many countries, the United States at the time, now they took it back off, that you're allowed to travel over their airspace. So instead of going all around this way, coming around this way, which is the shortest way, instead of going this way, then you don't cross the date line, but it's much, much longer to go this way. So you go this way, that's the shortest way. But today they go over the North Pole. So they have to end up parts of Russia. Russia gave permission, now they took it away as we said before, but there's still planes that are not American planes, are allowed to fly that way. So just like if you go this way, you don't cross the date line, you could fly this way without crossing the date line, but not necessarily so. Sometimes they do cross the date line, sometimes they go back and forth. They go the date line, go back and forth, depending on the route. The transpolar route is called, that they travel that way. That makes new shilas. Again, to go all the shilas and many, many things, it becomes a very big issue. Now, I just want to get to a famous thing that the Rebbe spoke about, and that is that we said before, Shabbos and Yom Tov and all these things is one thing that it goes according to the place exactly where it is. Shabbos and Yom Tov, you follow the Shabbos. Yom Tov, every Yom Tov is based on the Chumash. Rosh Hashanah is based on Aleph Tishrei, Kippur is Elul Tishrei, and so on and so forth. There's only one Yom Tov that is not, the faith is not based on the day of the month. Which Yom Tov is that? Shavuos. Because Shavuos, it says that Tisperu Chamishim Yom, you have to count 49 days, and on the 50th day is Shavuos. So the Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah, the Avovam at Beis, the Gemara says clearly, Al Tereb brings from Shulchan Aruch and Simon Tov Tzadik Dalet, right in the first sheet, that Shavuos could be Pomim, it could be Heisim, it could be Vovsim, it could be Zayin. That's about one because they have done it. Could be any of those three. How could that be? Nowadays we have the calendar that was made by Hillel, Hillel, great grandson of Hillel Hazokim. He made a calendar, perpetual calendar we use today, and that is that Shavuos always comes out on Vovsim, because Nisan is a Chedesh Molei, has 30 days. Iyar is a Chosed, so it comes out that if you count the days from the second day of Pesach, it comes out that Shavuos will always come out to be on Vovsim. But if, let's say, when it was Manu Makadosh Piyariyah, actually seeing the moon, so then it could come out that Nisan is Molei and Iyar is Molei. So then Shavuos would come out to be on Heisim. If they're both Choshev, they both have 29 days, not 30 days, then it can be on Zayin. If one is Molei, one is Choshev, either one, so then it comes out Bofsim. So there's three possibilities. Nowadays, we follow the calendar. But the Rebbe says, the truth is that even nowadays, there's a possibility of having different days for a yochid, for an individual, different days. What's the issue? The issue is, Sfiras HaImer is a mitzvah, as it says, Saparta Lachem, the Gemara says, Menachem Samachem Beis, it says, the Sfira Lecholecha B'yachad. It's not a Yebel. Has to be counted by the Bezdin, and the Bezdin establishes when it's Yebel. So they decide, and wherever it is, it's all over the world, the same thing. Here, the Sfira Lecholecha B'yachad. So let's say someone started counting Sfira. Counting Sfira, he was in America. Started counting Sfira. When he counted Yem Echad Lo'imer, so his friends in Australia, they already counted Yem Echad the day before, because they were on the other side of the Kavatayich. According to all the Kavatayichs we have over here, they already counted Sfira. I once went for a chasana in Melbourne. My nephew got married to my Glick's daughter, and chasana was like Beimer. You daven Ma'alim, they count Lamed Gimel Beimer, I count Lamed Beis Beimer. Lamed Beis Beimer. So, if I would stay there, I went back, middle of Sfira. So I straightened out and I came back, on the way back. But if I would stay there, so when they count Mem Tes La'emer, which means the night before Shavuos, I'm counting Mem Ches. So when they make Shavuos the next night, I have to count the Brochet, I have to count Memtes Leimer. It says Tmimis Tiyenon. It has to be Tmimis. You can't skip a Sfira and going the other way. You can't have the same Sfira said twice. Like some person want to say that. The Rebbe says clearly that's impossible. It says that it's a Sfira l'chol echad v'echad, and it's not based on a date. There's no date. If it's a yontiv and you cross the date line and you're coming into Sukkot is on Tesvav, you never had a Yud Gimel in the middle because Yud Gimel was lost. We went to Australia. You look, Mamshel was a day. And when we went to Ashlichus, there was Tavshik of Zion. You left on Monday. It was Chavdalad Adoration, and then Chavhei didn't exist. It was Chavav Adoration. So okay, but after that, no problem. So it comes Pesach, not a problem. You go according to what it is. Shabbos what it is. But with Sfira is only the only one that's different because it's Sfira l'chol echad v'echad. As you mentioned before, the Gemara says Feidish Pomim Behei Pomim Bevov Pomim Bezayin. It's irrelevant what the other people are doing as his Sfira. So when everybody is making Yom Tiv, this person has to count Sfira Mentes, and he has to make Yom Tiv the next night. The next night. If you go the other way, it's the opposite. Someone from Australia is coming, let's say, to America, to California, to New York, doesn't make a difference. So when he comes, he already counted Sfira. Whenever he's counting Memches, but he's counting Mentes. So by him, the next night is the Shavuos. For the other people, it's 2 nights away. So he has to make Shavuos. According to his Sfira. When he's going west, he's going east. The only difference is that's Matam Seinu. You can only say people that are there because that has to do with the day of the month. The day of the month that the Torah was given on Vov Sib. So just like in the time when the Gemara says Mekadosh Piyari, it could be that Shavuos ended up being on Hesiv. You celebrate Shavuos because both months were Malayin, but you can't say it's Mamat Terusena. Mamat Terusena has to be said only on the day of Vav Sim. So if you make Shavuos a day early on Hay Sivan, or you make Shavuos a day later on Zion Sivan could be the sake of the Avis, you make but they have to make 2 days at Zion and Ches. We have to make. So then Shavuos would be for himself, and the other way it's not. So the Rebbe said that because it's something which is, the Rebbe said daiti bruder, very clear, okay, and because it's muzar, it does come out strange. Everybody's making Yom Tiv, but this guy is putting on film, like the Israelis would come to the Rebbe in the old days. They used to, on the second day, some Kasteda, to put on film. Later, things changed about that. But would be the same way or the opposite. When everybody is getting ready for Yom Tov, it's the other way. Either way would be an issue. So that's what Rebbe says, that people traveling doing Sfira should not go through the Pacific, crossing the date line, but they should go the other way. They should go the longer way. They'll go to Israel and keep on going. You'll get to the same destination. You'll get to Australia, but without crossing the date lines, and then you'll follow exactly what they have, and the Sfira is not going to be messed up. The days get shorter. Just like we go to Israel, if you're going towards Israel, a day doesn't have 24 hours. If you're going against the sun, you're going with the sun the other way around, the days get longer, but that's a day. From sunrise to sunset is a day. So then it's like that. So this, the Rebbe wrote in the Sikha, Printen Cheli Gimel Kuta Sikhas, the Rebbe says the Psak very clearly. Now, in the Kuta Sikhas, there's a Sophis in the back. The Sophis in the back are put together from many letters of the Rebbe, in addition to the Sikhas that the Rebbe spoke. Now, I had the schus of putting together almost all of the Sophis and almost all the Krochim of Kuta Sikhas, which is more than half of the Kuta Sikhas consists of that. And this was nothing came from the Rebbe's archives, it came from collectors, etc., etc. We found a beautiful, amazing letter that the Rebbe wrote to Tzal Boshansky in Tovshin Tes in 1949. He traveled from Paris to Australia, through the Panama Canal, and he wrote to the Rebbe was a Rebbe then, he wrote to the Rebbe, he knew the Rebbe could answer him with all the lumbus and everything else. He said that in the middle, he went by boat, they told him that people should know that you have to change the date. The time's the same. If you're in the middle of the day, it's the sun is right above your head, it's 12 o'clock. But it says 12 o'clock, but you think it's Tuesday. Now it's 12 o'clock Wednesday. You should know. he didn't know what's going on. As he was in Levin, he learned Lubavitch, and he never learned about science, and he never heard of the dateline, doesn't know what that is even. So he asked the Rebbe, what is it? What is it? What happened over here? And what says you have to do with Shabbos, you have to do with Sfira, the whole thing. It was already, when the Rebbe wrote the answer, it was already after Shavuos. So the Rebbe writes, it's printed, it's 3 full pages. Over 3 full pages. And the Rebbe gives back and forth different possibilities and different sheeters. And the Rebbe brings down about that there's basically, the Rebbe quotes 3 sheeters. So the Rebbe says that there's ones I mentioned before, 90 degrees, 135 degrees, and 180 degrees, and mentions the Bnei High Sefer Ayim after Kuczynski, and the other one is the Chazon Ish. So the Rebbe said that the Shita on the 90 degrees, first let's say Yochid, and even according to him, the Rebbe does mention it could be because of grain that does go. The Rebbe explains to him that he should keep the way it's in Australia without any problems, because according to all the other Shittas, he passed the dateline, it's not an issue, and that's what he has to do. But then the Rabbi Shavuos, that's the Rebbe goes into the whole arichas, many different possibilities. Okay? So this is an amazing letter, but the problem is one big problem. In Chelik says Chelik Gimel, the Rebbe writes clearly that he has to keep Shavuos according to the place where he came, according to his feeling. So print such a letter, which doesn't all coincide with what the Rebbe is writing. So he asked the Rebbe, can we print this letter? Because it's not exactly the same. So the Rebbe said that we should print it, and the Rebbe wrote, people don't know, it's not written that the Rebbe wrote it, but the Rebbe himself wrote these words. And I'll read you the words that the Rebbe wrote about printing this letter. So the Rebbe wrote like this: Michtav Hanal, the above mentioned letter that's written to Rabbi Salvashansky, Hisvora Rishena B'Shaklat B'Tarya. That's the first thought, because there's a new thing, and in Shaklat B'Tarya, different opinions. You go back and look at the Sichas, it's on page, it's Chelik Zayin on page 285, those want to look it up. And that's the Shaklat B'Tarya and the Shita Rishena. Achaz man don eid hapam b'din d'dan. The Rebbe writes of a third person. The Rebbe wrote it himself. He was done, went through this another time. Ubola maskon. He came to a conclusion that this is how it is, that you have to follow the Sfira according to your counting, because Sfira l'chalecha b'yechod, there's no other criteria. And it's, the Rebbe writes in other letters, it's Muzar b'yeser, that we should tell a person, skip a Sfira. Has to get tmimah, it doesn't matter. You count memches, peshvus, with mantes. Or if you go the other way, you count the Sfira, the 17, count it again 17 for a bracha. Without a bracha, it doesn't make a difference. It doesn't make sense. So it has to be, the Sfira has to keep on going. And the Rebbe writes, the Rebbe said to print that Sicha from Chelik Gimel to Likutei Sichas from Pashas Emer to print the Sicha of Shlomo Sadova. So you have both things. So it's amazing. You see the whole sheet of what's going on, and there's the Rosh actually. Ezra Shochat, he learned in Brisk, I think, at a time, and he wrote that this in Tafshin Lamed. He discussed it with his Rosh Yeshiva, doesn't say who it is, and it was back and forth. So the Rebbe writes that Bella Hachigod. It's amazing wonder that it seems that Rosh Yeshiva didn't grasp Leitapus Inyan. It's a Shaila Shi Efshel Ima Banelech L'Chumre. You can't go L'Chumre about this. You can't do that, because this is that you have to count this way the other way. You can't make both things. Something you say count it with the bracha, without a bracha, listen to somebody else, etc., etc. Okay, so the bottom line is, again, it's time is short, okay. So this is it's Arucham Eres Mida. The Shal is all this volume about the Tarach, the Kabbatayich, according to the Halacha, many Sforim written about this today. It affects many things that have to do with the days, with bar mitzvahs, with abris, with many shalas that come up. So tonight we can't go through everything. We'll also sit until tomorrow. Okay, we shouldn't have any shilas. We should be able to celebrate all the Yom Tovim in its right time, properly. Kabbalah Sapteir, Simcha Batnimis, that everybody sure had in Ashvuos, Imamshik, all the Yomim that we nimshach from Shavuos and all the other Yom Tovim.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Mikowitz. Now we have Rabbi Aryeh Kirshner. It's an honor to have him here. He's a Rav in Iisro, Mונטריאול, and Rosh Koil of Ichud HaKehilas. So thank you very much for joining us.
very much. Coming on Isru Chag of Shavuos, so I thought it was appropriate to just share a ha'ara about the Geder, the essence, the nature of Birchas HaTorah. So it's a well-known Gemara. The Gemara says in Maseches Brachos, Daf Chaf Aleph, the Gemara says, "V'nayin Birchas HaTorah," that it's min HaTorah. How do you know that Birchas HaTorah is min HaTorah? So the pasuk that the Gemara brings is Kishem Hashem Ekra Ha'Goydel Elokeinu, which seems to be an open and shut case. The din, the chiyuv, to make a bracha before you learn is deraisa. It says min HaTorah minayin Kishem Hashem Ekra Ha'Goydel Elokeinu. The Ramban, in his ha'aris on the Rambam, as to which mitzvahs say the Rambam seemed to omit. Right? The Rambam had his count of Taryag mitzvahs, and the Rambam seemed to count some and leave out others, and the Ramban has his hasavos on exactly which count should be in the list and which count should be deleted. And the Ramban says for some reason the Rambam was mashmit, the Rambam omitted the chiyuv of Birchas HaTorah. Why is that not counted as a mitzvah, as independently a mitzvah of Birchas HaTorah to make a bracha before you learn? The Ramban says, if you would argue, like some do, that the Rambam held that the Gemara's pasuk is just an asmachta ba'alma, it's just a smach, it's a remez, it's not a chiyuv d'oraisa per se. He says that doesn't jive with the flow of the Gemara. The Gemara says clearly, right after it says Birchas HaTorah is min d'oraisa, min HaTorah, the Gemara says, if so, we should learn that the bracha before you eat should be d'oraisa based on a kal v'chomer. That if Birchas HaTorah before learning, right, is d'oraisa, there's no bracha after learning d'oraisa. Birchas Hamazon is d'oraisa, so then kal v'chomer, Birchas Hamazon l'fonel should be d'oraisa, because Birchas after you eat is d'oraisa after you eat. There's no bracha after you learn d'oraisa, so if there's a bracha before you learn, kal v'chomer before you eat. Then the Gemara says, if that's the case, then it's a kasha on the Mishnah. The Mishnah says a Balkari, someone who's a Balkari is not allowed to do brachas, but he's brachas that are deraisa he's supposed to do. Like is the Gemara, hear her or not hear her, but the point is he's mechuyev in those brachas. The Gemara says, if so, he should make a bracha before eating, and the Mishnah says only after eating. So clearly, says the Ramban, from the whole flow, from the kal v'chomer, from the kasha from Balkari, it's clear that it's actually deraisa. We actually mean it when we say Birchas HaTorah is deraisa, and therefore it says the Rambam is difficult. This should be on the list of Taryag mitzvahs, Birchas HaTorah. There happens to be a machlekes, and the Kiryas Sefer learns that even the Rambam agrees that Birchas HaTorah is deraisa. The bracha you make before you learn is deraisa, even if you're the Rambam. So why does he not count it as a mitzvah? Why is it not part of the list of Taryag mitzvahs? Because the Kiryas Sefer, the answer is that they're arguing, the Ramban and the Rambam are having a machlekes as to whether or not Birchas HaTorah is independent as a mitzvah or only a chelik of Talmud Torah. Maybe it's part of a general category of Talmud Torah that is on the count of Taryag mitzvahs. So Kiryas Sefer learns that the Rambam, who doesn't count Birchas HaTorah as an independent mitzvah, learned that Birchas HaTorah is part of the general rubric, the general mitzvah of learning. Talmud Torah has different branches, and one of those is the mitzvah of Birchas HaTorah. So that's the machlekes between the Rambam and the Ramban, the Kiryas Sefer. Is Birchas HaTorah an independent mitzvah, or is it counted as part of the general mitzvah of Talmud Torah? I was thinking, you could have just a very simple explanation of this machlekes based on what we know elsewhere about what the Birchas HaTorah is all about. What is the nature of Birchas HaTorah that we make a bracha before we learn? What's the geder of this mitzvah of Birchas HaTorah? There are different ways of understanding the bracha on learning. Birchas HaTorah, what's the nature of the mitzvah to make a bracha before you learn? Is it a Birchas HaMitzvah? Is it a bracha on the mitzvah of learning? Just like you make a bracha on lulav, you make a bracha on shofar, there's a bracha on learning. It's a Birchas HaMitzvah. It's one way of understanding what the bracha is. It's a bracha on the mitzvah of learning Torah. The second option is It's actually brought down. The Shulchan brings such a tzad that is a tzad that it's a birchas hanen. It's a birchas hanen. It's on the hana, the geschmack, the delight, the joy of learning Torah. What does it say? V'kudi Hashem yishorim v'samchei leiv. It's v'samchei leiv. So maybe it's pushed the bracha on the hana of learning. Tzad number 2. There's actually a third tzad, and the Mishkirov famously brings from Reb Chaim that neither of the above is true. It's not a birchas ha-mitzvah, it's not a birchas hanen. It's a bracha on the chefsa of Torah. What does that mean? That means the very gift of Torah, the very treasure of Torah facilitates bracha. It engenders a bracha to appreciate what you have. So there's inherently nothing to do with the actual learning that you're about to do. It's on the general gift of Torah, the fact that I have this beautiful matana, this beautiful chashav, treasure. It's so precious, it's so dear to me, I make a bracha in appreciation before I live. It's a birchas shevach v'hidah. As I said to Chaim, it's a birchas shevach v'hidah. It's the nafkamina. There are many nafkaminas. The classic nafkamina is whether or not a person, when he makes birchas Torah every single morning, has to stand up. Is there a din amida where you're supposed to stand up every single morning when you make birchas Torah? So if you hold that birchas Torah is a birchas ha-mitzvah, when Mishnah Berurah brings a machlekes, the lechatchila, we generally assume that you're supposed to stand for birchas ha-mitzvahs. And Yeshua says maybe only if it's the mitzvah that its fulfillment needs amida, so its bracha as well needs amida, which wouldn't apply to learning because Talmud Torah inherently doesn't require amida. But the point is that if it's a birchas ha-mitzvah, definitely you will have achronim and paiskim who will say stand for birchas Torah, and that's taka how some paiskim say. Some paiskim go that because we could argue that the birchas Torah mitzvah is a birchas ha-mitzvah, like the Gemara says in Pesachim Dav Zayin, Nayin Shemborchid Oiver Lasiyos, and you have to make a bracha before you do a mitzvah. Why? Happens to be, I think the Ritva says, the reason why we make a bracha before mitzvahs is we express the fact that the act, the physical act that we're about to do is l'shem shemayim. It's avodah of Hashem. It's a mitzvah. So you're verbalizing your intent. You're verbalizing and expressing what you're about to do. That it's actually a mitzvah. But be that as it may, it's a birchas mitzvah. You should stand. If it's a birchas hanen, you certainly don't have to stand. And a birchas hashevach b'aydah also you don't have to stand. So the nafkamina is: do I have to stand when I do birchas Torah? Do I have to stand? So it would be the contingent on this shayla.
Guys can talk about it by Kriyas HaTorah.
What?
Guys can talk about it by
Right, they're all standing.
Yeah. At least for
that happens to be a very strange thing, a very strange phenomenon. I don't know what goes on in this community. I'm Meicha, but where I come from, for some reason, you find many people, right, by an aliyah, and someone says Baruch Hu, and they get an aliyah, so they're sitting. They stand up for the actual kriya. Ikar adin, the kriya doesn't need to be stood for.
Right.
It's a bach that says maybe it's like a reenactment of Kabbalah Torah, you're supposed to stand.
Some sit by both.
Some sit by both. But I'm saying those that stand, at least stand when you're mechuyev to. The Mishnah Berurah holds, but when the person says Baruch Hu, you're mechuyev to stand because it's Hadavish B'Kedusha. Hadavish B'Kedusha is mechayev amida. So it's just like flipping the yitzvahs when a person sits for Baruch Hu and then stands for the kriya. But be that as it may,
another chiluk you could say maybe, I don't know, if you have to learn after you make birchas Torah. If it's Shalach Vayedah.
I hear. Very good. So there's your famous Yushalmi that says you have to learn alatar. So you want to say that if it's a birchas Hashem v'avadah, maybe I shouldn't have to learn.
Not you shouldn't. You don't necessarily.
Right. Here.
But that's why in the morning, right after Birchas Torah,
We say we say something to make sure that we're Mekayim this Yushalmi.
it became part of the Birchas HaShachar.
So I want to say a very pashta zach, very simple thing. We're saying that like the Kiryas Sefer, Machlekes Ramban and Rambam. Is Birchas Torah a mitzvah b'fnei atzmai, deraisa, one of the Taryag mitzvahs, or it's deraisa, says the Kiryas Sefer and the Rambam, but it's part of the general mitzvah of Talmud Torah, and therefore it doesn't engender its own bracha. It doesn't engender its own count as Taryag mitzvahs. It's part of Talmud Torah. What's the Machlekes? Perhaps the Machlekes is in this very shayla. If you hold that it's a Birchas HaMitzvah, right? It's a bracha on learning. So it makes sense that it shouldn't be counted as its own mitzvah. It happened to be amplified and pumped up by b'deraisa. But it's a regular birchas mitzvah that happens to be deraisa, so it's part of Talmud Torah. It's a bracha on the mitzvah of learning. So if the mitzvah of learning is counted as one of the Taryag, the Birchas HaTorah, which is the brach al ha-mitzvah shel Talmud Torah, shouldn't demand being counted as its own mitzvah in Taryag mitzvah. But if you hold that it's on the appreciation of Torah, it has nothing to do with learning. It happens to be, once you're about to learn, we demand appreciate the gift, the treasure. But it's appreciating the gift of Torah, it's irrespective of the learning that you're about to do. So it's a totally separate idea. The concept and the theme of Birchas Torah is distinct from the mitzvah of learning, and therefore it makes sense that it should be counted as its own mitzvah in the Taryag mitzvahs. It should be counted like the Ramban as a mitzvah of a happens to be interesting. Another nafkamina. Our lady is supposed to make Birchas Torah. So we know famously the Shulchan Aruch and Siman Mem Zayin Hilchos says, Noshin, women, mevorchos Birchas Torah. Ladies make Birchas Torah. Why? The Shtabur brings a tremendous machlekes in the Paiskim, machlekes in Achronim, why this is so. Why is it that women make Birchas Torah in the morning? Some Achronim learn they're mechuyev to make a bracha because they have to learn those mitzvahs that are pertinent to women. Women have certain mitzvahs, so even though all Taryag maybe don't apply to them, but they have to learn those mitzvahs that apply to them. Right? So some learn that that's not Talmud Torah, that's just a tactical, practical thing. You gotta know what to do. But no, some Gedolei Achronim are medayek from Yishanim that they have a chiv of Talmud Torah, and therefore they have a chiv of Birchas Torah with respect to those mitzvahs that apply to women. That's how some learn. Others say no. The reason why they make a bracha on Talmud Torah is because ladies, at least for Ashkenazim, can make a bracha even if they're not mechuyev in the mitzvah. The Goyin seems to say that. The Goyin says that they have to, lulav, they're potter from it. It's a mitzvah shezman grama. Many mitzvahs ladies are potter from because it's a mitzvah shezman. And nonetheless, Rabbeinu Tam, Ashkenazim say, make a bracha. Now the question obviously is that the Shulchan Aruch holds not like that, and the Shulchan Aruch says, Noshim mevorchos Birchas Torah. Side issue. But be that as it may, one tzad is ladies, right, make a Birchas Torah because even though they're potter, they can make a bracha. Right? That's side number two. The third side is Reb Chaim. On the chefsa of Torah, of course, that would demand a bracha even from women. It's not on the mitzvah of learning. The reason why you're making a bracha before you start your day is to appreciate the fact that you live by the Torah. It's about applying the Torah to your life. It's about engaging in life through the prism of Torah. So of course, a lady also would be incumbent on a woman also to make that bracha because that applies 100% to women just as it does to men. It's not about the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. It's a mitzvah to appreciate the gift and the concept of Torah. Those are three pshatim why ladies make a Birchas Torah. And this would be enough for me. And again, what the nature of the mitzvah of Birchas Torah is. What the nature of Birchas Torah happens to be. I have a little bit of a, I don't know if I can call it a pet peeve, but ha'ara. So Dirshu is a beautiful project, but it wasn't meant for you to paskin halach l'maisa based on Dirshu, because they're not here to be your placing, and they're not here to enable you to be your placing. They're here to give you some ma'amar kindness. So this is just a perfect example of that idea. They write, if you look at the Dirshu by Birchas Torah, this halacha, Siman Mem Zayin, so you'll see he brings from the Birkei Yosef Chidal, quoted by the Shari Tshuva. If a lady is besupik if she made Birchas Torah, so what's the halacha by a man? So he said, now if a man is besupik if he made Birchas Torah, are you mechuyev Birchas Torah? It's a suffix. So it would be dependent on this machlekes. If the chiyuv of Birchas Torah is the Raisa, like the Ramban, and like the Kiryas Sefer's version of the Rambam, then mesafik you have to be machmir, you have to be mevorich mesafik. If you hold that Birchas Torah is only the Rabbanon, like the simple understanding of the Rambam, like the Megillas Esther's version of the Rambam, then mesafik. You don't make a bracha just like all other brachas, safik brachas lahakol, right? The Ma'aseh Mishnah is noted to be machmir. He brings a Shabbos Aryeh that the ikar halach is that you have to be machmir. He does say that because it's machlekes, you should try to get someone else to be moitziu in Birchas Torah if you're mesubik, or you should be mechaber and avarabba to pat yourself. But if those options are not at your disposal, the Mishnah is inclined to say be machmir. What about a woman? A woman's mesubik, so they bring down the Dirshu. The Birkei Yosef says a woman's mesubik if she made Birchas Torah. The halacha is she's mekel. Even if a lady's mechuyev, at most it's the Rabbanon, and therefore suffer Rabbanon l'kula. So kvoidam b'mkayim munach, but l'maisa Mishnah Berurah is before not like that. Because the Bir Halacha, by the case of Noshim Mevorches Birchas HaTorah, has a whole machlekes in the following shaila. Can a woman, who we assume is Mevorches Birchas HaTorah, they make a bracha of Birchas HaTorah, can a woman be mitzi a man in Birchas HaTorah? Right? The guy stayed up the whole night learning on Shavuos. He's trying to get someone to be mitzi in Birchas HaTorah. Ask his wife to be mitzi in Birchas HaTorah. Is that an option? Is that an option? Is that a solution? The Mishnah Berurah over there says in the Bir Halacha that it depends on the machlekes that we mentioned before in the reasoning of this halacha. Why is it that Noshim Levarach is Birchas HaTorah? Is the pshat that she's mechuyev because the mitzvahs that are negayah to them, or let's say the Reb Chaim that the chefsa of Torah demands a bracha? Then why shouldn't she be able to be mitzi a man in Birchas HaTorah? Of course she could. She is mechuyev. The man's mechuyev. They're on equal footing. Of course, the woman could be mitzi the man in Birchas HaTorah. She's mechuyev just like a man. If she's potter, just that you could do brachas in spite of your exemption, then of course she's not on the equal level of man and she can't be mitzi. That's the psak of Mishnah Berurah. Clearly, what is the Mishnah Berurah assuming? That on the tzad that she's mechuyev deraisa. Otherwise, you can't be mitzi a man. A man's chiv is deraisa, your chiv is derabanan. You're not on equal footing. A derabanan can't be mitzi a deraisa. It's clear from the Mishnah Berurah, 100% explicit, that on the tzad that a woman is mechuyev in Birchas HaTorah, she's a mechuyev deraisa. Not like this Birkei Yosef. So if she's mesupik, the Mishnah Berurah would say, mesupik, you make a Birchas HaTorah, even if you're a woman. So Terence says the Dirshu is only looking for things that are mefurish discussing this question. Mishnah Berurah is talking about woman being mitzi man. He's not talking about suffix, so they didn't bring it. I guess that's not their job. But you can't pass him from the Dirshu because the Mishnah Berurah argues on this Birkei Yosef. But be that as it may, happens to be I once went to a Chaim Kanievsky. That's all. I asked him 2 questions on this Mishnah Berurah. I'll tell you what he said. And I'll let you decipher his response. So the Mishnah Berurah says, halacha l'maisa, a person's mesupik if he made Birchas HaTorah. Does he be machmer? Does he be mekel mesafik? So the Mishnah Berurah brings the Shagas Aryeh, you have to be machmer, Birchas HaTorah is deraisa, safik deraisa l'chumrah, you have to be make Birchas HaTorah. But he says, l'chatchila, get someone else to be mitzi, someone who hasn't yet made a bracha, and the other option is, be mechaven during avarabba to pater. That's what he says. He says even if you didn't, you could use avarabba b'di'evet because maybe you're really pater, etc., etc. So ask Chaim number 1, why is it the Mishnah Berurah gives 2 eitzes? Get someone to be mitziu, right? If you're mesupik, and yotze with avarabba. I said I have another option. I said a guy who's mesupik about Birchas HaTorah should go to the gabbai and ask for an aliyah. And he'll say Baruch Hu by the aliyah. And like this, he'll be yotze midei safik. That's what I asked him Chaim. Chaim said Echanami. He said Echanami. Why did the Mishnah Berurah not say it? I don't know. The gabbai is a tough customer, and he might not give you the aliyah.
It was a
And
Sunday.
Makri also.
What?
Yeah,
Has to be the Yom HaKriyah. So maybe the Mishnah was talking about a case where it's not a Monday and a Thursday. Then I asked him, I said, I have another eitzah that the Mishnah Berurah doesn't bring. I said, let the person who's mesupik in Birchas HaTorah go to someone who's before Avar. Let's say he already said Avar. He wasn't mechaven. And he didn't learn Alatar. Let him go to someone and say, could you be mitzi me in Birchas HaTorah when you say Avar? The person already said Birchas HaTorah. His friend is in the middle of davening. He already said Birchas HaTorah. So I could go to you, why not? And ask you when you say Avarabba, you might see me in Birchas HaTorah.
You said Yisro before. You said a bracha in the morning.
So what?
Twice the same
So
bracha.
that means he's potter already. He doesn't need it.
Yeah,
Yeah, but you're going to be mechaven to be might see me. It is in Birchas HaTorah.
He's not mechuyev already.
I know. I'm saying it because I'm a chuyev to say Avarabba. Sorry.
Yeah, but that's not.
But it's not the way that the common mistake is.
So he didn't explain. He just said no.
He said no.
He said no. I'm lucky I got more than a buha. He said no. So I'll tell you what I think, the way I understood him, could be this similar to, I understood what he's saying is actually a big insight. He's saying something that ikaro, right? The primary feature of an avarabba is avarabba. It's a birchas Kriya Shema. It could double over as a secondary, ancillary function as a Birchas HaTorah. You can't be moitzi someone in the secondary feature of your bracha. That's the way I understood it.
Yeah.
Meaning he's trying to say that since it's not its primary function, so you can't use that. But be that as it may, this is the Yesod of Birchas HaTorah. This is the Yesod of Birchas HaTorah. It happens to be one more case I'll give you as an example of, and then I'll wish you a Sameach B'ke Isru Chag. One more nafkamina, very interesting. Mishnah says, Suffolk, so we're saying to be machmer, because it's the Raisa. Do I only do one bracha when I'm a Suffolk and I'm being machmer, or I do all the brachas of Birchas HaTorah? Mishnah brings a machlekes between the Shagas Ari and the Pri Chodesh. Shagas Ari says once you're doing one bracha, that's the Raisa. Stop there. Don't do other brachas. The other brachas are D'Rabbanan. Pri Chodesh says once you're doing one, you do the others. Moshe has a kasha. He says, Moshe, I don't understand. He's saying that you only do one. The Mishnah's Iker Shita is Shagas Ari. Since only one bracha is deraisa, you only do one. It says there's a halacha in Siman Kuf Pei Daled in the Birchas Hamazon. A person's besupik, they benched. You ate Kadestia, you ate, you have to bench. Mei Safik deraisa l'choma. You say Birchas Hamazon Mei Safik. Mishnah says you say all four brachas of Birchas Hamazon when you're besupik, even though the fourth bracha is only D'Rabbanan. Hatayv Ameitev is only D'Rabbanan. Why is it that over there you say all four brachas? The Magen Avraham says Shlo Yizalzulu in the fourth bracha. We don't want people to degrade and disparage bracha number 4, so we say once you're doing the first 3, which are deraisa, also engage in the fourth bracha. Shlo Yizalzulu. So the question is, asks Rav Moshe, why don't you have the same svar when it comes to Birchas HaTorah? You do one bracha and we stop there. You say, why do you have the same svar? Shlo Yizalzulu ba, you should be mechayev the person to do not just the first bracha, you should do all the brachas of Birchas HaTorah. Shlo Yizalzulu. It's a good question. Moshe says in the Tshuva, because Moshe, the teretz is very similar to what we said from Rav Chaim. Birchas HaTorah is cholok b'yesod. It's fundamentally different than Birchas Hamazon. But Birchas Hamazon, all 4 brachas are the same theme, the same obligation, the same function, and that is Birchas Hamazon. It happens to have 4 brachas. Number 1, 2, and 3 are deraisa. Number 4 is D'Rabbanan. Over there, there's a concern. Shlo Yizalzulu in the 4th bracha if you just omit it when you're reciting Birchas Hamazon Meisafik. When it comes to Birchas HaTorah, there are different functions. Each bracha has its own category in halacha. One, says Rav Moshe, is a Birchas HaMitzvah. One is a Birchas HaShevach V'Haidah. It's on the appreciation of Torah. They're totally 2 different themes. There's no zilzul if I do one, not the other, because I'm not doing a partial obligation and dumping the rest. So there's no concern, says Rav Moshe, Shlo Yizalzulu ba, if they're accomplishing different feats. They're accomplishing different goals. One is a Birchas HaShevach V'Haidah, one is a Birchas HaMitzvah. So again, Rav Moshe is not going completely to Rav Chaim, but Rav Moshe is saying that when it comes to Birchas HaTorah, one bracha is a Birchas HaShevach V'Haidah on the chefza of Torah, so to speak, and the other bracha of Birchas HaTorah is a bracha on the mitzvah, kind of taking Rav Chaim and taking the other shitas and binding them together, merging them as one shita. Thank you.
According to that,
if women are mechuyev with the Raisa, from the pasuk Shem Hashem Elokeinu, or just because they have to know the halachas?
Well, since they don't have to know the halachas, they would be included in Shem Hashem Elokeinu. In other words, the fact that they have
It's about kינוס. Those that say something with the Raisa, because otherwise they can do a mitzvah, so it's not a mitzvah to be mechanech. You have to put on film.
right.
There's no mitzvah to mechanech because it's automatic. Film, there's no other way to do it.
So that's the other side.
Yeah.
If that would be the side, they wouldn't be mechuyev.
Mechuyev, yeah.
So I'm saying this side holds that heyois I'm mechuyev. It's mistaber to put me into Shem Hashem Elokeinu.
Shem Hashem Elokeinu.
according to the Moshe, it would come out that he should say all the brachas. Because if you say Birchas Mitzvah, maybe the Iker is the Birchas Shevach V'Haidah.
Yeah, but once
So then you should have,
he holds the only ones that the Raisa.
fine, but you don't know which one it is.
So he would learn that he does know which one it is. The first one. In other words, Rav Moshe is confident. We're not confident which one it is.
Well, you have to, I mean.
Rav Moshe holds the first one.
Okay, shkoyach. Thank you very much. Kirchner. Next we have Rabbi Avi Ashkenazi, one of the entire light here, who brings a lot of chayes of learning in Yagdiel. Please share with us a few words.
Thank you. First of all, as Maimon Amuzgar, almost exactly 60 years ago, the year was Tavshin Chavav. So the days after Shavuos, the year was on a Wednesday and Thursday. So Yisro Chag was Friday. So they had a Kiddush Torah in 770 on Sunday. And there's a known story with Rabbi Shayahu Herzl, how he was outside 770 as the Rebbe was leaving 770 around 6 o'clock. And the Rebbe saw him outside, and the Rebbe asked him, "What are you doing here? There's a Kiddush Torah happening inside." So this was like about a month before his wedding. I think he got married in the middle of Tammuz, and he was actually discussing with his future father-in-law about the wedding preparations. So he told the Rebbe, "We're discussing wedding preparations." So the Rebbe asked, "But there's a Kiddush Torah inside." The Rebbe said, "For wedding preparations, you have to take out time from your sleep." So he shared the story. This is almost exactly 60 years ago. So thank you everyone for joining us on this Kiddush Torah.
The afternoon.
What?
It was in the afternoon, the Kiddush Torah.
Yeah. All right. We're inside, right? Okay, so in the sugya of Chayv Adam Lahakbil, or Lakabil as some call, Pnei Rabba Beregel, it applies to the Klal we see from the one of Beregel. Beregel means the Shulchan Aruch, but there's a special connection to Shavuos, as we know that in Lubavitch, Shavuos was called the Chag HaMotzim or Chag HaMatzos, on the Chatzachos, that brings down in a few sichos, and the Rebbe says Mistama since the time of the Tzemach Tzedek, because for Rabbanim, it's hard for them to leave their communities on Pesach and Sukkot because a lot of shilas come up and different Yinanim, it's hard for them to leave the community. Mashenk in Shavuos, you don't have so many questions about the Yom Tov that come up as much as Pesach and Sukkot, so they would come to the Lubavitch or to the Rebbeim for the Chag HaShavuos. So it's especially connected for the Rabbanim who come to visit the Rebbe, so just to discuss a few Yinanim in terms of that. So in the sugya itself, there's a lot of questions that are discussed in the Achreinim. What's the gather of the chiyuv of Chayv Adam Lehakbil in Rabbi Beregel? There's a lot of questions, just to mention a few. Number one, when does this apply? Is this only on Shalosh Regalim, as we mentioned a few moments ago, or is it also Rosh Chodesh and Shabbos, as we're going to see from the Gemara, or Yom Tov? Some say even Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, not just Shalosh Regalim, or even Chol HaMoed, some say, and some say even any day of the year, even Yimei Choil, as we'll see further later on, if this chiyuv applies. That's one discussion when it applies. Another the question is who is obligated? Is it only for men? Does it also include women? And is there only single men and women? And even for married men and women, and there's also discussion, do you have to get permission from your husband? If a wife wants to go, and a man, if you have to get permission from your wife in order to do the mitzvah of Kabbalas B'nai. There's also discussion if it depends where you live in relation to where your Rav lives. If you live in the same neighborhood, in the same city, or far away, you have to travel. We'll discuss a few problems about that. There's a discussion to which Rav does it apply. Is it all the teachers you had in school, or only your Godesh Badin? How do you define the Rav in this scenario, in this regard? There's a discussion if it's a chiyuv or if it's just a mitzvah. And there's different opinions about this. There's a discussion if it's midiraisa or if it's midira Kabbalah, only the Rabbanon. And there's also a discussion in if this is a mitzvah of chelik of the mitzvah of the mitzvah Chag, or if it's mitzvah Kaved Rabbi. And there's different opinions also if you say that it's mitzvah Chag or mitzvah Kaved Rabbi. But time is short. We're going to focus mainly today in the discussion about if the chiyuv of Kabbalas B'nai Rabbi applies bisman hazeh. Okay, so that's what we're going to try to cover as much as we can. If Bichlal is a whole idea that it speaks in the Gemara that we're going to bring, if it applies bisman hazeh le'achar kurban after the Beis Hamikdash. So just to bring the Mekoros, this is brought down in the Gemara in two places mainly. It's in Rosh Hashanah, Daf Zayin and Beis, and also in the Gemara Sukkot, Zayin and Beis. Some differences in what the Gemara is trying to bring. But he brings in the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah brings different Mamar of Rabbi Yitzchak, and one of them it says Mamar Rabbi Yitzchak Chayav Adam Lahakbil Pnei Rabbi Beregel. The Rabbi Yitzchak says one of the things he mentions that it's chiyuv for a person to be mekabel Pnei Rabbi in the Shalosh Regalim Beregel. Shneimar, like it says in the pasuk, there's a pasuk in the Lachim base. Madua ati leches ila b'yayim lo yichedesh v'lei Shabbos. He brings this pasuk, we're going to explain soon, and he says Mikol de b'chedesh v'Shabbos yibayel le'mizrach. So we see that he was asking, we're going to explain the story, why you're going to this. So what's the story? This is a story in Melachim Beis, Perek Dalet, Psukim Chav Beis and Chav Gimel. There was Elisha Hanavi. He traveled to a place called Shunem, and there was an Isha Shunamis there. There was a prominent woman, and she hosted Elisha Hanavi in her house. She prepared the meal for them and even a room to stay. And it says there in Melachim how she hosted him very nicely, and then one of the things that he offered her, and he wanted to find out, is there something missing in this woman's life that I could give her a bracha for? So he found out, and then he called her over and he gave her a bracha that she should have a son. They were a married couple, they were very old, and that they didn't have any children, so he gave her a bracha that she should have a son. And she requested, do me a favor, if you're going to give me a bracha, make sure that it's going to be a son that's going to have a healthy life and is going to live, and I don't have to worry about anything. So then he gave a bracha. They have a year, and a year from now, and that's the Kachava. They had a year. They had a son sometime later, and that's the story. A few years later, the boy grew up, and it says there that he had a very, very strong headache as he was outside in the field with his father, and he became very, very sick. And then they brought him over to the house. She was holding him, and then he passed away. So she brought him to the room, and then she wanted to go reach Elisha to ask him, you promised me a son that was going to live, and you have to do something about it. So then she came to her husband, and it says in the pasuk, he asked her husband to prepare one of your servants, etc., so I can go reach Elisha to deal with the situation. So she didn't tell her husband why she was going, she didn't tell them what happened. So her husband asked, so he asked her, why are you going today? It's not Rosh Chodesh, it's not Shabbos. And then the pasuk says, she said it's going to be fine. She didn't disclose to him what was the reason, the purpose of her traveling. But we see from here, the Gemara says, from the question that her husband had, why are you going today? Today is not Rosh Chodesh and today is not Shabbos. We see there that there's a chiyuv that for this woman, Elisha was her Rav, to have between Rabbi Akaponim Rosh Chodesh and Shabbos. So then there's a whole discussion in the Gemara, how does Rabbi Yitzchak see from here that the chiyuv and regel, the Ritva brings, the Maaseh, most Rishonim, the Rif, the Rosh, the Rambam, they all bring this as a chiyuv without distinction if it's during the times of this Mikdash or after the Kurban. They bring this Ladina, and even in Rishonim who don't necessarily always bring, even in Rishonim who only generally speaking bring dinim that apply they also bring this as din without making any distinction. However, we don't find this in the Torah or Shulchan Aruch as a separate din per se. And on this question, there's a famous Rabbi Yehuda. He writes a tshuva to discuss this question. Why is it that the Torah and Shulchan Aruch didn't bring this din? That there's a chiyuv, the hakut bin Rabbi Baregel. So he goes on to explain the main answer that he gives is that Lamai said the reason why the Torah and Shulchan Aruch didn't bring is because it does not apply to Bisman Hazeh. It does not apply Lachar Churban. So because there's no chiyuv, that's why the Torah and Shulchan Aruch didn't bring. As you know, the Torah basically just selected all the din in halacha that applies nowadays. So he explained what's the reasoning, why doesn't it apply if you say that the Shulchan Aruch didn't bring because it doesn't apply to Bisman Hazeh. He says because we don't have a chiyuv nowadays to do aliyah and hegel, and therefore because we don't have a chiyuv of aliyah and hegel, goes together because we can't now do aliyah and hegel the same way we can't do Kabbalas Pnei Rabbein. It would be disrespectful, so to speak, to Hashem, to the Shekhinah, to now you're going to go visit your Rav, you're going to visit your Rebbe when you're not doing the chiyuv of aliyah and hegel because unfortunately we don't have the Bisa Mikdash. He says there is still a mitzvah or nothing on the offer to do so. We can't say that there's a chiyuv mitzvah for that reason. That's what the Rabbi Yehuda said. Now many Acharim question on this Rabbi Yehuda, and I'm just going to share a few the questions. First of all, the Ritva he brings that based on the Gemara that we just mentioned that al kaponim on the Chodesh and Shabbos. There's a kaponim of chiyuv to those who live in the same place. The Ritva makes a distinction. He says that depending on where you live, that's how often, how frequent you have to do this mitzvah of Kabbalas Pnei Rabbein. If you live in the same city as the Rav, in the same place, and it's easy for you to go, so there's a chiyuv for you to do every Shabbos and every Rosh Chodesh. If you live a little bit further down, then it applies only at certain times, and then if you live really far, it only applies in the day. So we see from the Ritva that Al Kaponim, and based on the Gemara that we see in the Melachim, the chiyuv applies even on Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh. So how can you say that it's connected to the mitzvah of Aliyah Regel? It has nothing to do with it. It's a separate thing, it's independent. So you can't say, like the Rebbe said, that the reason is because nowadays we don't have the Beis Hamikdash, so you can't do a little regel, so therefore Kabbalah's Pnei Rabbi doesn't apply. No, it's nothing to do with it. Kabbalah's Pnei Rabbi applies even on Shabbos and Ashvedesh, there's something in Gemara, as it's brought down in the Torah and others. Another question that people ask on this, on the Aruch LaNer, he argues with the Yehuda and he says no, it does apply nowadays. As we saw also from most of the Rishonim, there's no distinction between Bisman Beis Hamikdash or after the chiyuv of Kabbalah's Pnei Rabbi does apply, and he brings proofs. He brings a proof from the same Gemara, the Gemara in Sukkot Chavzayin on the base. It's talking about Ma'aseh Rabbi Loi B'Loi Shehalach L'Hagel Rabbi Yazid Rabbi B'Loi B'Lud B'Regel, and this was after the Churban, and he brings from many other Gemaras. The Gemara in Sukkah also in Daf Yud. There's a story there that we're talking about. This discussion if the decorations in the sukkah becomes a hassle to the schachting from your kind of sukkah. So one of the answers that the Gemara gives, there were some people that were traveling, and then they asked them, "Oh, you hold that this would be would invalidate the sukkah, so why are you not saying anything?" So the answer, no, because we're shlucha. It says, "Ana shluchi mitzvah anan." Put them in a sukkah. We're shluchi mitzvah. Rashi explains there that what does shluchi mitzvah means in that case. He says that they were going to be mekabel pnei Rabbi, and this was also after the churban. There are other explanations of what the shluchim mitzvah means in the Gemara, but Rashi Kalpani brings, and many Mefarshim bring, that it means l'haklu pnei Rabbi. Some say it was for other purposes, maybe for pidyon shvun, etc. But we see here that according to Rashi, mitzvah shluchim mitzvah pturim in a mitzvah, pturim in a sukkah. That's why they were bought from the sukkah. And again, this was after the churban, so we see that there was a chiyuv. If you're going to say that they're being bought from a sukkah, it has to be that they had a chiyuv of Kabbalah's Pnei Rabbi even after the churban. He also brings some other Gemaras, the Aruch LaNer brings not just from the sukkah, but the Gemaras in Kiddushin, the Gemara in Shabbos, many other places where we see maises that even after the churban there's this concept of chiyuv to be mekabel pnei Rabbi. So he completely disagrees with the Yigdiel on this point. Now, just to mention, this that the Tudim Shulchan Aruch didn't bring it, the Aruch LaNer explains. So we still have the question: why is it not brought down halacha in the Tudim Shulchan Aruch? This idea, it's still a chiyuv nowadays. So he says no. He says that bichlal, according to the Tudim Shulchan Aruch, the chiyuv applies any day of the year. It's not something special for the regular. Yes, we have this Gemara in Sukkah and Rosh Hashanah that Rabbi Yitzchak said that there's a chayav b'regel, but nevertheless, the ma'aser applies every single day of the year. There's a mitzvah upon him, some say even a chiyuv. They have to be mekabel pnei Rabbi, and therefore that's why the Shulchan Aruch doesn't bring a special ruling about this, that you have to be mekabel pnei Rabbi b'regel. There's no need to bring the words of Rabbi Yitzchak. And just by the way, this halacha of Dina, l'hagel pnei Rabbi is brought down in Shulchan Aruch in other places, and even in Alter Rebbe, we're going to mention a few. So first in Simon Tov Rishon Gimel, in the halachas of Rechitza, in Yom Kippurim, there's another halacha, I think it is even in Shulchan Aruch, that you can't wash yourself on Yom Kippur, but if you're going to a Dvar Mitzvah and you have to cross a river or whatever the case is, so then you're allowed to, even on the way there and also on the way back, as we know, because otherwise if you just on the way there, people are not going to do it. And one of the examples that Alter brings there in Simon Tov Rishon Gimel Seif Ches, Ha'ilech le'Beis HaMedrash Eile Haklu Pnei Aviv Pnei Rabbi, or Yim Shegadim Ben Bechachmo, Yitzchak Hashem Mitzvahs, Yachei La'Rab B'Mayim Matzafore, Ben Ba'aricha, Ben Chazara, Ben Cheshesh Mishum Nisud, Rechitza Ben Kippurim Yom Sheilech B'Dvar Mitzvah. And then he also goes up and explains the issue of Rechitza on Shabbos and Yom Kippur B'Chlam. But we see from here that upon him, it's brought down Shulchan Aruch, also Alter Rebbe, that we find this concept that Kabbalah's Pnei Rabbi is a mitzvah, and you have to say to a certain extent even a chiyuv, otherwise we wouldn't allow a person to be doing the Rechitza on Yom Kippur. Likewise, in Hilchos Sukkos, in Simon Tov Rishmem, connected to what we learned earlier about Gemara, he says also there about different people that are turim the sukkah, and one of the examples Alter Rebbe brings, this is in Simon Tov Rishmem, Sifut Ches. He says the chol zeh mishu hilech l'dvar shuz, aval mishu hilech l'dvar mitzvah, ki goyim v'haklu pnei Rabbi. And then he says ein etzarech l'tref v'lasis sukkah. You're not to be in a sukkah. So another example we do find in Shulchan Aruch in Alter Rebbe this concept of l'haklu pnei Rabbi. Now we also find in Simon Shin Aleph, this is the beginning of the Shabbos, according to the Isurim and the stuff of Shabbos. We don't have the whole Alter Rebbe on this, but the Magen Avraham there brings in Seif Katan Zayin. The Shulchan Aruch says also the idea that connected to Shabbos also, you're allowed to cross a river on Shabbos, even though you can be a problem with Rechitza, but if you're doing it, Dvar Mitzvah is permissible. And the Magen Avraham also speaks there about Seif Katan Zayin, about the chiyuv of the Haklu Pnei Rabbi, how it applies nowadays. And also in Simon Tov Kuf Nun Daled, similar to Yom Kippur, we have an Egia Tisha B'Av, we don't know that, but the Mongol there in Seif Continue base, and this is a Chiddush he says there, he says like this, the Mechaber brings that Tisha B'Av also, you're allowed to cross the river and you're allowed to get wet. There's no Isro B'Chitza if you're doing for a mitzvah, such as the Haggadah Ben Abay. The Mongol writes, Nirali Shehu B'Choyel. We're talking about the Tisha B'Av falls during the week. You said you're allowed to cross, so the Mongol says, it appears to me that we're talking about during the weekday, because that's what Tisha B'Av is, and we're still saying that you're allowed to get wet for Kabbalah's Ben Abay. Haggadah Ben Abay, the Shabbos, and the Chol Ein Chiyuv the Haggadah Ben Abay. So the Mongol says, we must say that we're going on, let's say it's Erev Shabbos, Tisha B'Av on Friday, that doesn't happen on even Thursday. Let's say you're traveling now, you're on the way to your Rav, you're going to be there for Shabbos, and now because it's part of a mitzvah, so you're crossing that on a weekday. So there's a mitzvah applies on Shabbos, so you're doing this on a weekday. Inam, he brings another answer, maybe in the Hin, the Chiyuv, the Leika B'Chayil, the mitzvah the Magen says that you can actually answer that there's still a chiyuv to do even on a regular weekday. There's still a chiyuv of the Haggadah Ben Abay. When the Mechaber is talking about crossing the river, is talking about the day itself. You're going to be behind the mitzvah of the Haggadah Ben Abay on the day itself. Again, we see the chiddush that, according to some, even during a regular day, like one of the answers of the B'nai, that the mitzvah of the Haggadah Ben Abay applies throughout the year. Again, someone added that it's not just a mitzvah, but you have to say that it's a chiyuv, because if you say that it's just a mitzvah, who says that that pushes away the Isro of Rechitza on Yom Kippur and how much more so on Tisha B'Av, which has different dinim of Rechitza, but some say that you have to establish that there's not just a mitzvah, but actually a chiyuv, in order to allow you to do that, based on what's brought down the law. Al Kaparim, we see that in many.
Have to do with the chiyuv.
Sorry?
The Rechitza Shal Mitzvah, it doesn't matter.
I know, but there's a discussion if the Rechitza Shal Mitzvah is enough. There's also a different dinim between Yom Kippur and Tisha B'Av. Just timing or not. There's different opinions on that front. Al Kapanim, we see that many Rishonim hold that the chiyuv still applies nowadays, but the Rebbe Yehuda states that it does not. By the way, some say the opposite of what the Rebbe Yehuda says. The Rebbe Yehuda says that the chiyuv only applies Bisman Habayis, Bisman Besamidosh, and not nowadays. Some hold Mufakes. Some say that it didn't apply Bisman Besamidosh, and it only applies after the Churban because it's Ke'ain, the idea of Aliyah L'Rega. So the chiyuv began only after the Besamidosh was destroyed, and now there's a new takana, so to speak, that you have to be Mekabel Pnei Rav, so that it should be like Kikabolas Pnei Shekhinah B'Mikvah. So the Malbim writes in the Malach in there, and then many other Mefarshim bring also Malach. So we have here from the Rebbe, the Rebbe brings this by passing the L'Kutei Sichas Chelik Lamed Beis. This is in the Sikh of Shmirim, the second Sikh. The Rebbe discusses about the idea of the Chayav the Tayr Atzma B'Regel, and the Rebbe goes on to explain with Rashi how if it applies nowadays or not, if it's in Chutz La'aretz or in Zman HaGalus. And there in footnote 28, the Rebbe brings the Rebbe is talking about. Perhaps you can say that the chiyuv of Tahir Atzma B'Regel applies even nowadays. The Rebbe brings there L'Hoyer Shumay Ben Rabbi Yitzchak, which talking about the Tahir Atzma B'Regel. Bo Sham Behemshech L'Mamoreh Lifnei Zeh Chayav Odom L'Han B'Regel B'Regel. And the Rebbe says She'einu Yimug Bo L'Zman Habayis Davka. The Rebbe brings in parentheses the Rambam. I think this is on Twitter, but Yom Chazayin Shemar L'Chaim Simun Shinalas and Sidal B'Mogedom Zayin, which we mentioned. The Rebbe says that Einu the Behuda Matzilat Tanino L'Chaim Simun Tzaddik, which is the Rebbe we mentioned, where he argues with this premise that it applies nowadays. So basically, Chemet, Klanim, Bereches Ches, Klal Kufin, Kamen Krimet, which is not the place to discuss this because we're talking about the chiyuv of the Tahir Atzma B'Regel, but the Rebbe does mention that there's such machlokes that we mentioned that according to most Rishonim, the chiyuv of Haggadah Ben B'Regel applies nowadays. Mashenkin, the Rebbe Yehuda and others say that it does not. We also have an interesting letter from the Rebbe in the Igros Kodesh base. This is on page edition Dalet. This is a letter that Rebbe wrote before the Nesios. This is Chav Dalet Tishrei Tovshin Ches, and there's a letter addressed to the Moshe Shayovich from Chicago. So the Rebbe, this is right after the Simchas Torah, the year to Chav Dalet Tishrei Tovshin Ches. But the Rebbe says is questioning him why he didn't come to, I guess, the 770 to visit the Frierdiker Rebbe for Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah. And the Rebbe says, the Rebbe brings there by the Chabal, Kimam El Azal, the Rebbe says, the Rebbe says, Chayav Adam L'Hakmi Pnei Rabba B'Regel, Rebbe Kasemishna, etc. And the Rebbe says, Hine Av Shato Makilim B'Hanal, even though nowadays many are lenient in this regard, to say that there's a few, the Chama Tiny Naimer Bazel, there's different reasons why it does not apply. Hine Oid Achazeish Bazel, the Rebbe goes on to explain the idea of Ishtachavo and how it's connected to it, but it's an interesting letter. And I also I wanted to see who this person was, and I saw that in Tovshin Yud, Also, during Chol HaMoed, Sukkot Tavshin, the Frierdiker Rebbe sent a telegram that he should come visit the Frierdiker Rebbe, and Itaki came. So it's mamish connected to this idea that 2 years earlier he didn't come, and the Rebbe wrote this letter. But 2 years later, mamish last year, that the Frierdiker Rebbe was before the Stalkus, he came to be the Kabbalah Pnei Rabbi Beregel. I just want to add a few more nekudas. There's a separate. It's funny to read the Shem Discipler that the chiyuv does not apply Bizman Hazeh. It says not Bizman Hazeh mitzad the discussion that we mentioned, but mitzad a different reason. It says that Bizman Hazeh in this regard means after the Gemara times and after now. Things are things are people learn Torah through Svarim, through books, and not through the Shebal Peh. So therefore, automatically, it's a technical reason. The chiyuv of Pnei Rabbi doesn't apply because we don't have a Rav Muvak, Rabbi Muvak. So the Maaseh, he said the Zman Hazeh doesn't apply because after the Zman of the Gemara, we don't have any more this Rabbi Muvak. That the criteria would be that you have a chiyuv of the Haggadah Pnei Rabbi. Many questions on the Stifler, what's the connection? Even in the Gemara, there were people who learned in Svarim, not necessarily about the Torah Shebal Peh, and still that applies. And who said that it has to be Rabbi Muvak? But I just want to mention that. And also an interesting yesterday afternoon, I was looking at the Rambam and Mevur, Chitrik Rambam. He brings, for whatever reason, he brings in the Hara in the Rambam, in the Talmud Torah, he brings from the Yalkut Yosef, and he has a whole arifos on this inyan. But one interesting thing that he brings there, for whatever reason, is that he says that the same way that by Aliyah L'Regel, we have this concept, it's brought down in Chagiga, that it's not just enough that you go to the Beis HaMikdash and you see what's going on, and you bring the carbon, etc. But there's also an additional inyan that the Hashem shall see you, Le'irayis, right? That there's a concept that the Shekhinah should see you. So he said the same applies to Kabbalah's Pnei Rabbi. It's not just enough that you go to visit your Rabbi Muvak, but there's an inyan also that the Rav should also see and participate in this mitzvah of acknowledging your presence, etc. So it's an interesting quote that he brings there. And I just want to conclude by quoting, I think it's a very important Yemim. It's the Yemim of Tes Adar Sheni, which is a protocol connected to what we learned. This is in Tavshin Gimel. This is exactly 3 years after the Frierdiker Rebbe came to America, and it's definitely connected to the day. The Rebbe says there, "Goydel Amshuka leIskashrus, Yochel Lasvia Rak Asher Yilmid Mamore Chasidu Shem and Rabbi Pesach Kipirias Panivuhan leIsagi." That is, in other words, saying that it's not enough just to see the Rebbe. For many people, it was the first time in many years that they saw the Frierdiker Rebbe when they arrived to America in Tes Adam of the year Tavshin. So the Rebbe says that the way that you have Iskashrus to Rebbe is through learning his Torah, learning his Gemarim, etc., and then doing that, of course, in addition to back in the Rebbe. So maybe the Zeiche is an easy way to finish off, but I just want to make sure that I say it properly, that there should come to a time where Kuli Alma we're going to be Zeiche to be the kind in the midst of Kabbalah's Pnei Rabbi Beregel, maybe it's building nowadays to be
Thank you very much. We have Rabbi Zelig Waldman, the Rosh Kollel of Bells, and Mitzvah Shem after we have Fonneville Mosque. So stay with us.
Heute for the Chasanya, this is gewaltige Torah here, which is called Yagdiil Torah. First of all, I owe a special across the Torah, this is gewaltige Mokim. Many times I enjoy learning here with peacefulness in this beautiful place. Es leiblich helfen, ich especially a Mokim, we can verspreiten Torah and Chassidus continuously mit Achumas Adas. A special thanks Rabbi Shoichet for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to give over the Shir. The Shir today with Zayim Hashem, the Sigya fin Tashlimen B'Chag Vatzeres, the fascinating Chiddush from the Chok Yaakov. I'll try to be mekatzik, es gibt noch a Shir, so a kurze Sache. Bekannte famous Rambam als so a mitzvah von Korban Chagiga, this meant every year has a chiyuv, an obligation to bring a Korban Chagiga every Yom Tov, Pesach, Shia, Sikkis. Korban Chagiga was a shlomim, an ox, which a part of it went to Mizbeach, part for the Kahanim, and part for the Baalim, the whole family. It's a mitzvah esed the reise the chagoysem oisem chag l'Hashem mitzvah von Chagiga. Jetzt die Gemara says in Chagiga daf tes if someone didn't bring the Chagig for whatever reason, Shagig to remind that he didn't bring the Korban Chagig the first day Yom Tov, you could be mashlim without the whole Yom Tov. You could bring it the second day, third day, until 7 days, he has time to be mashlim the Korban Chagiga. Selbe Sache is Yom Tov Sikkes, he can be mashlim the Korban Chagiga until Shmini Atzeres can mashlim sein the Korban Chagiga for Yom Tov Sikkes. In the Gemara, as a Posik, steht a Posik, v'chagoysem oisor chag l'Hashem shimas yomim. The Gemara oisor is one korban, but you could be mashlim without b'meshech 7 days. Is the Gemara in Avit Zion brings a chiddush. So even Chag HaShavuos, which is technically only 1 day Yom Tov, we have the privilege to be mashlim the Korban Chagiga 7 days. This is a Hekesh, Chag HaMatzos, Chag HaShvius, Chag HaSikkos. Let me know. You have the Torah get a schis. You could still be mashlim the Korban Chagiga the whole week after Shvius. Interesting thing. Technically, it's a regular weekday, and you could bring the Korban Chagiga and the Misyot to the mitzvah esed reise from the Chagosim oisor chag l'Hashem. Kimt the Mugan Avruam the Simon Lamed Aleph and the Alter Rebbe in Shikluch Harav in the same place in Ichas Tachnen. Mahai Tana, the Minig of Olam is we don't say Tachnen in these days because these days of Yom Tov, the days after Shvius, Yom Tov, because you can still be mashlim the Korban Chagiga. Therefore, since Yom Tov to take, we don't say Tachna. Kimt the Chok Yaakov and Simon Tov Ein Gimel. Take a baltige chiddush. We all know it's to a choiv mit Rabbanon to machen a bircha Shech Yuni every Yom Tov. Now, if we forgot to say Shech Yuni the first day, so to give the same thing, just as we see, we could be mashlim the Korban Chagiga every day Yom Tov. The same thing applies to Shech Yonu. We could be mashlim the birchas Shech Yonu Meshech 7 days Yom Tov. Meaning to say, if someone forgot by Kiddush first night to say Shech Yonu, you could be mashlim the second day, third day, whenever you remember, you can still say Shech Yonu. Kim the Chok Yaakov the gewaltige Ofti. Just as we see, as Yom Tov Shvius, we have the privilege to be mashlim the Korban Chagiga 7 days within the weekdays. The same thing will apply to Shech Yonu, meaning if a person forgot to say Shech Yonu Shvius Balach, he could say it today, tomorrow, a whole week. A whole week he has time to say Shech Yonu, to give mashlim the birchas Shech Yonu. In a pasuk is Halucha Lamaser. It's Chok Yaakov, it's in Ichas Pesach, Simon Tov Ein Gimel. The Pri Megudim quotes him, doesn't argue with him. Aber es ist gewaltige chiddush. We could be mashlim the birchas Shech Yonu a ganze Woche after Shvius. It's quite called the Achronim ask two strong kashas of the Chok Yaakov. The erste kasha is do for the Chovetz Chaim is in the Uris Yishar Tziyim. It's Simon Tov Ein Gimel. He asks gewaltig geschrieben. If you make Shech Yonu, let's say Sunday afternoon, Pashas Nusoi, or Monday, Tuesday, it's a Shalach from Bal Toysef. You say Shech Yonu, you're stating today is Shech Yonu that you want to begin Azman Hazei. It's like you're stating today is the Yom Tov Shavuos, the Shalach Bal Toysef. How could we do so? How could we do such a thing? Mechan Shech Yonu Shem Malchus. Kili was saying today is Shavuos. One gewaltige kasha. The second kasha, fragt the Eli Rabbe, like Ferische Gemura in Eirevin Daf Mem. Die Gemura in Eirevin Daf Mem sagt, Ten Heilig Yeshivu v'gam L'shmoinu. The Gemura says this passage is referring to Birchas Shech Yonu. Ten Heilig Yeshivu, Eilig Shivim Pesach. Pesach we have time to be mashlim Shech Yonu 7 days. V'gam L'shmoinu. L'shmoinu is 8 days Sikkos B'Shmini Atzeres. V'gam is L'Rabbeis Atzeres B'Shishuna Yom Kippur. Fragt the Eli Rabbe, if the Chok Yaakov is right with his chiddush, that Shvius is the same as Pesach, we could both mash them the Shech Yonu for 7 days. Why does the Gemara in two separate limudim? One limud ten chaylik yeshivu ali my Pesach, v'gam l'Rabbas Atzeres. Why can't the Gemara say ten chaylik yeshivu ali my Pesach v'Atzeres, which we have 7 days? V'gam l'Rabbas Rosh Hashanah Kippur, which have 1 day. Why does the Gemara take the Yom Tov Shavuos and put him inside the limit of V'gam, as Kilu he doesn't have the 7 days, he only has 1 day. So Mash Mekluf and the Gemara, the Shech Yoni, for the Yom Tov Shavuos is the same as the Rosh Hashanah Kippur, which we only have the day of the Yom Tov. We don't have an opportunity to be Mashlem, the Birchas Shech Yoni. Es seht mir der Choyre von der Gemara klar, als Shech Yoni kann man nicht Mashlem sein. Wir sehen ein gewaltiger Chiddush von der Reiches Bekirim, a beautiful teretz to verschämpfen the Chok Yaakov. The Reiches Bekirim was a brother of the Chayshik Shlomo. There were 2 dayonim in the town of Vilna. going back 180 years ago. Very famous cipher. The Tzal, he has on the back of every Gemara we have the Maraya Koyen, which is this is a Tzal Koyen, which he made the cipher Rashis Bekirim. Sucht the Rashis Bekirim azoy. Die Gemara sucht the Chagigin of Tes. What's the pshat the Tashlumen? How does Tashlumen work? We could Achakira. We could say it two ways. We could say Tashlimen means the real and the Ikke Choiv is only the first day of Yom Tov. If you miss the first day, then you have a chance to be mashlim the other 6 days. Meaning the main chiyuv is the first day. The other days are tufel. If you didn't do the first day, you can be mashlim on the other days. But the main chiyuv and the obligation is really the first day of Yom Tov. Das rief sich Tashlumen Rishon. Das ist die Schitte von der Göchenem. Der zweite Mahalach ist, die Gemara, Reb Oishi holds no. It's Tashlumen Zeh Zeh. Meaning to say every day of Yom Tov has the same chiyuv as the first day. There's no difference. The first day has the same chiyuv as the last day. It's chakel as rize makdim and the mitzvahs bring the korban the first day. But technically the chiyuv is the same the first to the last. Reb Yochanan zog Tashlumen Rishon. The chiyuv is only the first day. You can be mashlim the other days. Reb Oishi says no. Every single day is the same chiyuv and it's called Tashlumen Zeh Zeh. So die Gemara mai banai. Was it enough gewinnen mit vielen Röchen und andere Brüche? So die Gemara chige wie am Rischen, she is passionate beim shiny. Chige means a person who's limping, a person has a limp, and the first day he was potter of a regelsam. Let the roof la pusik shulish regulem, Russian regelaim. You have to have 2 healthy feet. If you can't walk to the Mikdash, you put the floor regelsam. So chige the first day Yom Tov he was potter of the chagiga because again a chige. She is passionate he became a healthy person the second day Yom Tov. He says, Lot Reb Yochanan, this is Tashlumen Rishon Kimtos, since the first day Yom Tov, he had no chiyuv, he was putter of the mitzvah korban chagiga, so finished, the whole Yom Tov is putter. It's finished shaykh, to be mechayev, this person, because the day of the chiyuv, he was putter. Masha'aykin Reb Oishi says, every single day of Yom Tov is the same chiyuv, so therefore, even though the first day you were putter, since the second day and onwards you were chayev, so you must have a chiyuv to bring a korban chagiga. Ad kam die Gemara. Zug treust es du nifla. Die ganze Chiddush von Reb Oishi, as Tashlime Zeh Zeh, that's Yom Tov Pesach all 7 days, or Yom Tov Sikkos all 8 days have a chiyuv every single day. Their Chiddush is only shy on Pesach and Shvius, Pesach and Sikkos. So it treust es Yom Tov Shvius, Hagam, we could be mashed at the korban chagiga 7 days after Shavuos. But their chiddush to go and say every single day after Shavuos as the same chiyuv of Yom Tov. Look, the Mishnah says, how about serious? Look, the stabber the maimer tashlumen zeh zeh. Keep the chol gumehi. It doesn't make sense to say a regular weekday has the same chiyuv of Yom Tov. So pshat is but Shavuos, everyone is moided to Reb Yochanan as a tashlumen rishon. That means only the main chiyuv is Yom Tov. You have the schis, an opportunity to be mashlim the other days after Shavuos. But kind of, it's mistabel to sagen as all 7 days after Shavuos, every single day has the same chiyuv because it's chol gomer. The Meilach Kivna is a chigah. She is passionate. If someone was a limp on Yom Tov Shavuos and after Shavuos became healthy, is a potter because the whole chiyuv is only Yom Tov. Since the chiyuv he was potter, is potter. Zogt der Rashis Bekirim, dieselbe Schale kann man klären bei Birchas Shechioni. Was im Pshat, Takunas Chazal, was supposed to say Shechioni the first night Yom Tov HaKiddush. And then we could be mashlim all 7 days. Kann man lernen dieselbe Schale, 2 Wegen, we could explain one way. The main chiyuv of Shechioni is only the first day Yom Tov. But if you forgot, you can still be mashlim all 7 days. Other night, we could say the Birchas Shechionu is mechiyev, every single day has a chiyev, separate chiyev atzmi of saying Shechionu. As du a mitzvah, as rize makdimen, you start the Yom Tov, lach zu Shechioni. Or be'etzli, the chiyev is equal every single day. Dabei nachgeben, a kurdish in gadol. If the first day Yom Tov was a cotton, he was part of Shechioni, and she is gadol, he was a gudel with Yom Tov, but a ger, first day was a ger, second day she is gaya. He was put the first day. Shechioni is every single day. Is that a chiyuv? Shechioni is only the first day Yom Tov, and afterwards is a tashlumen. Therefore, since the first day Yom Tov, he was pot, he was a cotton, he was a ger. it was a goy, he wasn't yet this guy, so since the first day was potter, it's a putig aus Yontif. Sagte Chok Yaakov, sagte ich hier, aber so kann man sehr schön verämpfen, der Kasche von der Eli Rabbi. Herr Joist, he just, what English needs from Tosfos. Tosfos says, even though we have a privilege, we could be mashlim, the Korban Chagigah every single day, but Vade doesn't mean every single day is a Chiv Atzmi. It says Chol Gomet, it's impossible to say so. Shatir, the main Chiv is a day Yontif. You can be mashlim, but the other days it's a tufel to the Yontif. Even though the Chok Yaakov might be right, you could say Shechionu the whole week of after Shavuos, or the Pshat for Shechionu is not every single day is a Yom Tov. No, you have the privilege to be mashlim the Shechionu which you owe from the Yom Tov. So not every day is a Chiyuv Atzmi. No, the Chiyuv is to say Shavuos. The Torah and Chazal have given us chis, you can still be mashlim the Shechionu which you owe for the first day Yom Tov. Therefore, can ich die Gemurah sagen, ten heilige Shivu, Ali my Pesach ish vatzeras, because the different soidos. Pesach, lotet euch hier is touched, tashtumen zele say, every single day has a chiv atzmi, or sorry, 7 days, it's every single day has an extra chiv, and even a chigash in his passion will still be mechiv. Masha Aikai Shavuos is the only chiv is the first day. Other days not violent the first day. Is a besoy the itzim is not the chiv ein tog. Aber since it's different from Pesach, kann man nicht anlegen ten heilige shivu Pesach vatzeres bis man anlegen the pusik vegam the rabbis atzeres. Mit denen kann man verämpfen die Kasche von der Sharetzion. Sharetzion gefragt the Choyra Shalach and Baltoisef. The chief is the Chok Yaakov never told us. The 7 days after Shavuos is every day is a Yom Tov. It's a separate chiyuv. The Chok Yaakov cycle told us, as after Shavuos, just like we find, we could be mashlim the Korban Chagigah, which we owe from Yom Tov. Therefore, when you say Shechionu, doesn't mean Shechionu that today is a Yom Tov. We say Shechionu, we go with Simcha, which we owe the Simcha to the Yom Tov Shias, who we called Torah yesterday, Zugum Shechionu, as we danken der Eibishter, aber wir solche gewähnt umzukommen to the Yom Tov Shias. Das ist ein Tashlumen für die Yom Tov Shias. I'll conclude mit einem scheinen Wort. Jetzt weiß man, der bekannte Gemurah, Ilah Vayomer, kam Yosef Ike B'Shike. With many Pshotim, I'm looking from the Rebbe, beautiful Pshat, kam Yosef Ike B'Shike, as the Gashmias, what men sehr schwer zu können, auflegen Kedisha. Ich gesehen, das ist sehr scheiner Pshat. We all know, every person, human nature is that a person has many colors, many faces. Das heißt, you find a person, let's say we call him Rabbi Yankel. Rabbi Yankel in this marriage is one person, in business is a second person, at home is a third person, with his friends he's a fourth person, when he's on vacation he's a fifth person, when he's angry he's a sixth person, when he's happy. People change by moods, by matzovim, by everything changes around the person. And people is poshet tzira, v'loivish tzira. A person who's a zoicher, to learn a Torah. The Torah gives guidance and ashkofa and chiyas for the person to set his way properly, as whichever matzah, whichever mood, whichever situation he is, he'll always be the same person, selbe Eitelkeit, selbe Midas-Torah, because the Torah did us the person. Rav Yosef, we find a very interesting thing. Rav Yosef got Drash tell us. He was a Rosh Yeshiva. The Gemara of the Summer of Rav Yosef, the Rosh Yeshiva, 22 years in Bedisa. Rav Yosef got a Gabbat Tzedukah. The Gemara of the Kamas had the Gimel. He got a Gabbat Tzedukah. Rav Yosef was a big Oishev, a Gedir. The Gemara of Menuchas Paisayan. Rav Yosef had got Paradise in the Kura, many fields of vineyards. So Yosef, he was a Rosh Yeshiva, a big Gevir in Abgabat Tzedukah. Now we find many interesting midas and traits of Rav Yosef. The Gemara sagt Rav Yosef, Anine Natur Enur, I'm a very particular person. Betrefft die Gemara Kedisha Lamed Aleph, he was a Sagi Enur, he was totally blind. Betrefft die Gemara Nedura Mem Aleph, he was a Choyle, Meshukach Talmida, he forgot all his learning, he had ganz vergessen. Abaya had to constantly try to remind Rav Yosef the Torah. Betrefft die Gemara Psuchem Kifid Gimel, Raschen Anu, Captain Anu, I'm a Balkasen. I'm a person who gets very angry quickly. Is Rav Yosef zogt, Ilav HaYoyme, the nicht the Torah, Kamo Yosef Ikke B'Shike, there would be a Rav Yosef the Gevir, Rav Yosef the Balkassen, Rav Yosef the blind, Rav Yosef the Choyle, Rav Yosef the Rosh Yeshiva. I would be so many different faces. Kamo Yosef Ikke B'Shike. Beschis aber der Torah, durch solche gewähnt, I was the same Rav Yosef, the Rosh Yeshiva, the Gevir, the Gabat Tzedukah, and all my matzov. Even I was blind, I was sick, I was ill, I was particular, I was about Kassen, I was always able to be misgaber on my midas, on my tzuvim, to be a happy, gesünder Mensch mit meiner Torah. Und der Eibisch der Helfer, beschis der Torah, so mein Kabel gewähnt, soll es begleiten, immer soll sagen, wenn ein Torah, ehrliche Jiden, Chassidim, Jirayim, wie es Gott zählige, weil mein Umay.
Rashi sagt, gedalten in the semantic. Rav Yosef.
Thank you very much. Achar Chavi, we have Father Wilmowski, a Taylor in German, a Shliach, a Machine. You should share with us a few words.
Okay, make it short. This year, Shavuos fell out on Shabbos. Right? The Gemara says, leave and do Pesach. Pesach can fall out on Monday, Wednesday, or Friday. So according to that Kvias, Shavuos can never become on Shabbos unless the second day. Right? So like this year, Shavuos is on Shabbos. The Gemara says in Shach Shabbos that the Kula Alma Atzeres was on the first Matan was given on Shabbos. Explain the Chassidus at length, but so we're going to focus on a sugya, very closely the sugya in Masechtas Shabbos, which has a lot of implications on the rights, like we're going to see. The halach, the sugya of Tzikreisha V'Liyamus, and the sugya of Malachash and Tzich L'Gufa, and how they come together, where they meet, and where they don't. Okay? So, we're going to start with the Gemara in Masechtas Shabbos, where the Gemara lays out the idea of Tzikreisha. Okay, the Gemara says, somebody catches a fish. Allah is a certain fish, he's smashing it. He's only chayv one. He's chayv two. Why? You take something and you're smashing it, you're taking out the blood, it's disha, that's considered dash. Dash, you're taking one thing out of the other. You're chayv two. Right, there's no betzia, taking blood out of a fish is not considered dash. Why? Right, the famous halacha, the famous rule that when it comes to dash, it's only by something which grows. Duli karka, fish is not something that grows, so there's no halacha of dash. Why not? You're not chayav because of cheshayt. You're killing the animal. You're killing the fish. One option, the Gemara says, if says you're killing the fish, it's already dead. There's no chiyuv of sheikh. Rava says, the famous words of Rava, you can even say it's talking about taking the fish out of the water and you're smashing, you're killing it. Why is there no chiyuv of dash, of netilas neshama, mesasaku eitz netilas neshama? You're being mesasik, you're not intending for it. You have no interest in the killing of the fish. Reb Shimon, which we're going to learn about in a second. No, we know he holds that even by, if it comes to malacha she'etzakufa, you don't want it with malacha. You still chayv b'psikreisha. So why? So you should be chayv. Where it says shani hacha, the common is a neshama tfei. As long as he has a neshama that has a chiyus, that has a life, nichali. You'd rather it be alive. Why? Because the Rashi explains that as long as the fish is still alive, it has more blood, and more blood comes out. You should have more of the color. Right, so we have the clear Gemara. The Gemara introduces the idea of Tzikreisha, and the Gemara says even the Reb Shimon, which says malacha shein etzich legufa malacha, which you don't need for the intent of that malacha. When it comes to Tzikreisha, you're chayiv. Right. So now we're going to see the question. Now let's bring the Gemara about the Tzikreisha, about malacha shein legufa. This the Gemara Tzadi Gimel. The Chinka Zayis, the Mishnah says Zayis and Nes, Zayis and Avelu, the Kadosh and Asheretz. If you take out one of these things, talk about the malacha b'yitzah, you are chayiv. Right, Shimon Potter, Peter, Shimon is Peter. Right, this is the Chleikus, it's the base of the Chleikus between Shimon and Yehuda regarding Lacha Shin Tzich Legufa. Yehuda says you're chayiv, even though Rashi says we're talking about a corpse. You don't need the corpse, right? You'd rather not have it, right? You're trying to get out of your house. Yehuda says you're chayiv. Lacha Shin Tzich Legufa. You don't need the gufa of the eid, so you're chayiv. And Shimon is Peter. So let's see Rashi quickly. Even if it makes shalom, because not a Lacha Tzich Legufa. And the whole malacha sheitzucha gufa, elo, this is important because this is mamish shit of Rashi, elo lisalko me'elov, you're taking it away from you. You don't want it, you're just throwing it out. It's a shlilis nikazach, you're being shoylet, you're taking it away from you. Having malacha sheitzucha gufa, the b'ritzoyne, l'boloi, you'd rather not be. You don't need it. It's not considered melechas machshavas. Now it's a big question. A side note: whether this idea is only by Shabbos or it's a whole discussion of other isurim in Torah. But let's focus now on Shabbos. Okay, so this is the famous shit of Reb Shimon, the malacha she'eino tzricha legufa, a malacha which you don't need. You'd rather not have, according to Rashi, or you don't need it. Like the Alter, we're going to see later, the Alter explains it, that it's something which the malacha you're doing with, you need that malacha you're doing it. You're going to see the examples, but the idea is, whatever you're doing the malacha with, you're using that thing for something which you need it for. Okay? So, the question obviously comes right over here, before we get into any mefarshim, the question is clear. How do you have a case, we see that Shimon is chayiv by psik reishay, yeah, even if Shimon agrees that psik reishay is chayiv, and malacha she'eino tzricha legufa, you're potter. How do you have a case where you don't have, where you're chayav b'psik, you don't have malacha she'eino tzricha legufa? In the words of the Aruch HaShulchan, if you go to the next page, right, the second Amar Makim, the Aruch HaShulchan asks this, look at this, yeah? The Yesh was a sheila g'dayla, right? He's discussing the idea of b'psik. You have a big question. Deich afsher le'his chayav l'Reb of b'psik. How is it possible in Metzias, in the Ilum and Agashmi, to have this Metzias of psik reisha which you're chayiv? Since you don't have the kavanah, you're not miskav into this thing. Obviously, pshita shenitzach letachlis. You don't need its outcome. In Cain and you still have the kopanim malacha shenitzach legufa. Any case of psik reisha is automatically malacha shenitzach legufa. How do you put these two gemaras together? If it's malacha shenitzach legufa, if it's a psik reisha, it's obviously not l'tzorech gufa. So time is short. There's a lot to discuss. It's a very big sugya, but we're going to go. The Aruch HaShulchan gives an answer. The Aruch HaShulchan says, I didn't quote it, but the Aruch HaShulchan says like this. We know that regarding mitzvahs, right? There's an opinion in Machoikes if mitzvahs tzrichas kavanah or not. If you do a mitzvah, you need to have kavanah, right? So you do need kavanah. You don't need kavanah. According to the opinion that you don't need kavanah, he'll also agree that if you have the opposite kavanah, not to be yotzeh, you're for sure not yotzeh. Right? Bestam, you didn't have any kavanah, so then, okay, can zayin your yotzeh. But if you have the kavanah hefchis, an opposite kavanah, you're for sure not yotzeh. It's actually negate to Surah Soimer. According to Hashmash, it's not negate to that. So the Aruch HaShulchan said this is the difference between malacha she'nitzich legufa and psik reisha. Psik reisha, when you're chayiv, is that you're doing a malacha, you're dragging a bench. You have no intent to make a hole, not to make a hole, to thresh, all the malacha. There's nothing to do. You want to get your bench from point A to point B. Fine, that's it. But in such a case, it's like the case of the stam mitzvah, you're chayiv. But if you're doing a malacha she'nitzich legufa, what's pshat? You're doing a certain malacha. You're having intent, you're having kavanah for this malacha, but for an opposite reason, not for the tachlis of what was done in the Mishkan. The Mishkan had a certain reason why you had to make this, whatever malacha it is, and that was the purpose of it, and you're doing an opposite purpose. That's in the words of the Aruch HaShulchan answers. Okay, that's one way. But, I don't want to be short, we're going to go straight to the point. Right, there's a lot to discuss, but the Alter Rebbe doesn't want like that. The Alter Rebbe in Shulchan Aruch, in Siman Reish Ayin Ches Daled, the Alter Rebbe clearly says like this. And I'll just say it outside, and we can learn inside, and we'll finish off with that. The Alter Rebbe says that psik reisha, according to the Shimon, you're only chayiv psik reisha if it's malacha tzricha legufa. It has to go together. If you don't have a malacha tzricha legufa, even though it's psik reisha, you're going to be potter, according to the Alter Rebbe. Okay, let's read it inside. Everybody agrees that psik reisha, you're going to be chayiv. Sometimes. The case of the is that we don't have kavanah for the malacha, for sure. If you don't have the kavanah, you don't need it. Right? The question of the Aruch HaShulchan. So Alter Rebbe brings a case, and this is a very big yisoid. With Sinu, the Alter Rebbe gives an example. The Kegoyin, for example, Shadover Yidua, it's known, so you know, in other words, in the end of the day, you're going to have intent for it. You're going to have a hanafa.
You have a desire in it. Even though practically, cognitively, you're not having kavanah for this thing, but in the back of your head, you're going to ask him 20 minutes later, you're going to ask anyone on the street, is he going to enjoy this? Is he going to have pleasure? Yes. How is that? He's going to need it, even though right now he's not kavanah. Ketzad. I'll take this example. You have a hole in the barrel. You're taking out wine from this hole and you stuff it with a piece of flax, right? It's like the, but this piece of flax has a lot of wine in it, right? And you're sticking it in. When you take it out, when you're putting it back and you're really putting it in there strongly. It's impossible the wine's is going to kvetch out. And that's a malach of dash. Squeezing, right? There's discussion if it's a severe, etc. But it's a malacha. It's a malacha. There's wine, there's good wine there. And if your content is not to do schita, is not to kvetch out the wine, talk a good wine, but that's not your kavanah. Your kavanah is to close the barrel. How did he say psikration? That's psikration. Okay, so that's the case of psikration. If there's a keli, there's a plate under it, which is accepting the wine, you're receiving the wine, you're chayiv in a trade on this closing of the barrel. Sha'adover yudua, it's known. This is the yisod. It's known. You are going to have pleasure from this wine that's going to come into this plate. It's in the handkerchief, you don't have any intent. You have no anok. This is the malacha tzricha l'kufa. Even though you do not have intent to it, so this is the idea that how do you have a case according to the Shimon that it's malacha? How do you have a case of psikreshe together with malacha tzricha l'kufa? How do they go together? This is the exact case. In your mind, cognitively, you don't have any thoughts at all. You're stuffing the barrel and you want to close the hole. So that's psikreshe, right? Because you're automatically taking out the wine. Why are you chayiv? It's not malacha shen. It's malacha shen tzricha l'kufa. It isn't. Why? Because the wine coming out you're enjoying it. The malacha, which you're doing, schita is gonna come to your benefit. So that's the idea. There's a lot to discuss, but time is short. So to finish off with Mizayche, Alter says, "Ilmol Yisrael mishtam shtei Shabbosis miyad in Golin." Alter explains the Shabbos Tatov and Shabbos Ilah, which is is the idea of shisa from Torah Gashmin. And there's hechre in Yomim, learning Chassidus and davening v'chulu shmizayche b'karim mamish.
See this chelik dalet, he says the sach saying. The Sima Alter Rebbe Shchomer explained the whole thing that the kavanah goes over and then that makes the situation. He says chelik dalet,
Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. All the Rabbonim. Shtak Mizoyche to Torah Chadoshim Giteite, Kínus Torah, Yerushalayim in HaKodesh, Amen. B'Yameinu Mamish.
Shkoyach.